The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Subspace follows predictable patterns. Warp fields obey mathematical constants. Even the Bajoran wormhole, despite its artificial construction by beings beyond linear time, operates within measurable parameters. But what happens when something punches through the fabric of space-time itself, dragging the laws of a different reality along with it? Deep Space Nine's sensors screamed warnings at 0342 hours station time. Chief O'Brien bolted upright in ops, his hands flying across the console as spatial distortion readings spiked beyond anything in Starfleet's database. The numbers didn't make sense. Subspace was tearing, but not like a wormhole. This was violent, wrong, like reality itself was being ripped open by something that had no right to exist here. Wormhole opening? Captain Sisko descended from his office, still fastening his uniform jacket. Negative, sir. O'Brien's Irish accent thickened with stress. I don't know what it is. Energy signature is completely unknown. Whatever's coming through, it's massive and it's burning hot. The view screen flared white. When the light faded, the senior staff of Deep Space Nine stood frozen, staring at something impossible. A warship hung in space 3 kilometers from the station. But not like any vessel in Federation records. Its design was brutal, utilitarian, a study in armored angles and weapon emplacements. Nearly 2 kilometers long, the ship bristled with what could only be gun batteries, launch tubes, and armor plating thick enough to be visible even at this distance. No nacelles. No obvious warp core configuration. The hull was scorched, pitted with weapons impacts, trailing atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches. And it was aimed directly at the wormhole. Red alert, Sisko ordered, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. Shields up. O'Brien, hail them. Dax, full sensor sweep. I want to know what that thing is and how it got here. Jadzia Dax's fingers danced across her science station, her spots darkening with concentration. Benjamin, I'm reading massive energy signatures throughout the ship. They're not using warp drive, it's something else entirely. Power generation is based on fusion? No, something more exotic. The energy output is incredible for such a primitive configuration. Primitive? Major Kira Neri stepped closer to the tactical station, her Bajoran earring catching the red alert lighting. That ship has enough firepower to level a continent. I'm counting over 500 individual weapon systems. They're responding to our hail. O'Brien reported. Audio only. They're asking us to identify ourselves and state our intentions. Sir, they sound scared. Sisko straightened. This is Captain Benjamin Sisko of Deep Space Nine, representing the United Federation of Planets and the Bajoran Provisional Government. You've entered Bajoran space near a critical strategic asset. Please identify your vessel and explain your presence here. Static crackled through ops, then a voice emerged, human, male, young but carrying the weight of command. This is Commander William Adama, Colonial Fleet Battlestar Galactica. We've experienced a critical malfunction in our FTL drive during combat operations. Our jump calculations were compromised. We don't know where we are or how we got here. A pause. And we don't know if you're real or if this is another silent trick. The name meant nothing to anyone in ops. Dax pulled up linguistic analysis. The language was clearly a variant of Earth English, but the syntax pattern suggested centuries of divergent evolution. O'Brien ran the ship's configuration through every database available. Nothing matched. Cylon? Sisko exchanged glances with Kira. Commander Adama, I assure you we're quite real. We're detecting significant damage to your vessel and multiple hull breaches. Do you require assistance? Negative. The response was immediate, almost defensive. Galactica is combat capable. We don't need anything from you until we understand what you are and why you're occupying this region of space. Our sensors show dozens of vessels in the area, multiple space stations, and what appears to be some kind of spatial anomaly directly ahead of us. Explain. Kira's eyes narrowed. He's not asking. He's demanding. Benjamin, this feels wrong. Sisko held up a hand. Commander Adama, the spatial anomaly you're detecting is the Bajoran wormhole, a stable passage to the Gamma Quadrant maintained by... Wormhole? Adama's voice sharpened. Artificial construction or natural phenomenon? Artificial, created by non-corporeal entities, but... The channel cut off. On the viewscreen, the massive warship rotated, bringing its bow to bear on Deep Space Nine. Launch tubes along its flanks slid open, revealing rows of small craft. Weapon batteries tracked the station with mechanical precision. They're powering weapons, Kira snapped. Multiple contacts launching from the ship, 48 small craft, fighter configuration. They're forming an attack pattern around the wormhole. Shields holding. Odo reported from his security station, his changeling features arranged in their usual suspicious expression. But Captain, those aren't energy weapons. I'm detecting physical projectiles. Explosive rounds, possibly nuclear warheads in some of those launch tubes. Nuclear weapons! The Federation had abandoned such primitive armaments centuries ago, but the yield readings O'Brien was getting suggested these Colonials had refined them to devastating efficiency. A full salvo from that Battlestar could crack Deep Space Nine open like an egg, shields or no shields. Sisko made a decision. Stand down all weapons. Dax, open all frequencies. I want them to see we're not hostile. O'Brien, route all available power to shields but do not, under any circumstances, return fire. Benjamin. Kira started. That's an order, Major. They're scared and confused. The last thing we need is to confirm their paranoia by shooting first. He straightened, facing the view screen. Galactica, this is Captain Sisko. We are not your enemy. Stand down your alert status, and we can discuss this situation calmly. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. The small fighters. Vipers, Dax's sensors identified them, held position in a defensive sphere around the wormhole. The Battlestar's weapons remained hot, tracking solutions locked on the station. Then Adama's voice returned, harder now. Captain Sisko. We've been fighting an enemy that looks human, talks human, and bleeds human right up until you cut deep enough to find the machines underneath. They infiltrate, they deceive, and they kill. So you'll forgive me if I don't take your word that you're not the enemy. A breath. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to move your station away from that wormhole. You're going to order all vessels in this region to maintain a minimum 5,000-kilometer distance from Galactica. And you're going to give us time to run a full diagnostic on our FTL systems and figure out where the hell we are. Refuse, and I will interpret any approach as a hostile act. The channel closed again. Sisko looked at his senior staff. Kira was furious, her hand hovering near tactical controls. Odo looked grimly satisfied, as if this confirmed his general distrust of the universe. Dax seemed fascinated, already running comparative analyses. O'Brien just looked tired. Options, Sisko said quietly. We could disable them, Kira offered. Quantum torpedoes, concentrated fire on their power systems. That armor's thick, but it's nothing compared to Dominion hull plating. We could cripple them before they got a shot off. And confirm everything they believe about deception and hostility, Sisko countered. No. They're traumatized, displaced, and armed to the teeth. But they haven't fired. That tells me Commander Adama doesn't want to fight any more than we do. The wormhole chose that moment to open, its beautiful blue vortex blooming in space. A Jem'Hadar attack ship emerged, followed by two more. The Dominion patrol registered Deep Space Nine, the Defiant in dock, and the Vipers struck first. Small, incredibly agile, the Colonial fighters dove on the Jem'Hadar vessels with a ferocity that stunned everyone watching. Kinetic rounds tore through shields that had been calibrated for energy weapons, punching deep into hulls. The Jem'Hadar barely had time to return fire before explosive payloads detonated inside their ships, chain reactions consuming all three vessels and expanding fireballs. 30 seconds. 3 Dominion warships reduced to debris in 30 seconds. Gods, Kira breathed. On Galactica's command channel, Adama's voice was ice. Captain Sisko. We just detected 3 vessels emerging from that wormhole. They're broadcasting in a language our computers can't translate, but their weapon signatures and approach vector indicated hostile intent. We've neutralized the threat. Now, are you going to tell me what the hell those ships were, or do I need to start assuming this entire region is hostile territory? Sisko realized 2 things simultaneously. First, the Colonials had just done Deep Space Nine a favor. Those Jem'Hadar ships had likely been scouting for another major offensive. Second, Galactica had just demonstrated combat capabilities that made them the most dangerous unknown factor in a war the Federation was already losing. And somewhere in the Gamma Quadrant, the Founders had just learned that something new and lethal had entered the Alpha Quadrant. The debris from 3 Jem'Hadar attack ships tumbled past Deep Space Nine's viewports, still glowing with residual heat. In ops, the silence stretched like a held breath. Captain Sisko watched the tactical display update. 48 Viper fighters reforming their defensive perimeter around the wormhole, their flight patterns suggesting military discipline refined through constant warfare. Galactica held position, weapons still hot, waiting. Captain, Dax said carefully, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures in the wreckage. The Jem'Hadar ships were destroyed by conventional explosives and kinetic penetrators, but the efficiency is remarkable. Their shields weren't designed to stop physical projectiles traveling at those velocities. The Dominion won't ignore this, Odo observed, his voice carrying the certainty of someone who'd spent decades studying Founder psychology. 3 warships destroyed in Federation space. They'll consider it an act of war, whether we committed it or not. Kira's fingers hovered over her console. Benjamin, we need to establish control of this situation now. That Battlestar just opened fire without warning, without verification of hostile intent. They saved our lives, Major. Sisko's tone was measured but firm. Those Jem'Hadar ships were on an attack vector. Galactica's sensors read the tactical situation and responded. They didn't fire on us. They also haven't stood down, Kira countered. They're still blocking the wormhole with military assets, threatening a critical strategic resource during wartime. The Bajoran militia has every right to. Incoming transmission from Galactica, O'Brien interrupted. Commander Adama is requesting face-to-face communication. He's asking for proof we're human. Sisko met Odo's gaze. The changeling security chief raised an eyebrow. An interesting request, given our current crew composition. Route it through, Chief. Visual channel. The view screen shifted from the starfield to show Galactica's Combat Information Center. The CIC was cramped, lit by red emergency lighting and dozens of tactical displays. Crew members moved with practiced efficiency through the tight spaces, their uniforms dark gray and utilitarian. And standing before the main camera, hands clasped behind his back, was Commander William Adama. Young. Sisko had expected someone older based on the command authority in his voice, but this Adama couldn't be more than 35. Dark hair, intense eyes that carried the weight of too many battles, and a bearing that suggested he'd earned his position through fire rather than politics. A fresh burn scar traced along his left jawline. Captain Sisko. Adama studied the view screen with the same intensity Sisko was applying to him. You're human. I am. As are several members of my crew. Several. Adama's eyes narrowed. Not all. The Federation is an alliance of many species, Commander. Humans, Vulcans, Andorians, Bajorans, and hundreds of others. We're united by shared principles, not shared biology. Something flickered across Adama's face, skepticism mixed with something that might have been longing. An alliance of species. Working together. Living together. He shook his head slightly. Where we come from, humanity stands alone. We had that once, maybe, before the Cylons. Before we created machines and gave them intelligence. Before they decided we weren't necessary anymore. The ships we destroyed. A woman's voice came from off-screen. The camera angle adjusted to include her, also young, dark-skinned, with the bearing of a senior officer despite her apparent age. Lieutenant Colonel, based on the insignia Dax was already cataloging. What were they? Jem'Hadar attack ships. Sisko explained. Soldiers of the Dominion, an empire from the Gamma Quadrant, the other side of that wormhole. We're currently at war with them. Soldiers. Adama's expression hardened. Organic or synthetic? They're genetically engineered for combat, loyal to beings called the Founders through biological addiction to a substance called Ketracel White. But yes, they're organic. The colonial officers exchanged glances. The woman spoke again. Genetically engineered soldiers bred for absolute loyalty to their creators. Commander, that's uncomfortably close to. I know what it's close to, Colonel Tai. Adama's jaw tightened. Captain Sisko, I need you to answer some questions, and I need you to understand that lives depend on your honesty. Can your people shape-shift? Can they mimic other beings? Sisko felt the weight of Odo's presence behind him. Commander, one of my senior officers is a changeling, a shapeshifter. Constable Odo serves as Deep Space Nine's chief of security. He's been a trusted member of this crew for years. The CIC erupted. Sisko could hear raised voices, see crew members reaching for sidearms. Adama held up a hand, silencing them, but his eyes had gone cold. You have a shapeshifter. On your command crew. During a war. His voice dropped to something dangerous. And you're telling me this voluntarily. Because transparency is the foundation of trust, Commander. And because Odo is not your enemy. You don't know our enemy. Colonel Tai stepped fully into view, her hand resting on a sidearm that looked disturbingly powerful for its size. The Cylons evolved. They learned to mimic human form perfectly. They infiltrate, sabotage, kill. They look human, bleed human, pass every medical scan we have. The only way to find them is through sustained interrogation or catching them in acts of sabotage. And you're casually telling us you have a shapeshifter on your senior staff? Odo stepped into the viewscreen's range. I am also not your enemy. The Founders, my people, created the Jem'Hadar you just destroyed. They lead the Dominion. I consider them zealots and tyrants, and I've spent years helping the Federation fight against them. The CIC went utterly silent. Adama stared at Odo with an expression Sisko recognized, the look of a man watching his worst nightmare confirmed. Your people created genetically engineered soldiers. Adama said slowly. Bred them for loyalty and combat. Then sent them through that wormhole to conquer this quadrant. Yes. And you opposed them. Vehemently. Why? It was a simple question, but Odo straightened as if facing judgment. Because I've seen what order without freedom becomes. The Founders believe themselves superior, destined to control all solids, non-shapeshifters. They would eliminate chaos by eliminating choice. I've lived among solids long enough to understand that chaos, messy as it is preferable to perfect tyranny. Adama studied Odo for a long moment. Colonel Tai. Your assessment. Tai hadn't taken her eyes off Odo. Either he's genuine, or he's the most sophisticated infiltrator we've ever encountered. If it's the latter, we're already compromised just by talking to him. Agreed. Adama turned back to Sisko. Captain, I'm going to be direct. Galactica jumped here from the middle of a combat engagement. We were outnumbered 3-1 by Cylon raiders, our FTL drive was damaged, and our navigation systems gave us coordinates that shouldn't exist. We jumped blind, hoping we'd come out somewhere we could make repairs. Instead, we're in a region of space our star charts don't recognize, surrounded by technology we don't understand, being told about alliances between species and wars against shape-shifting creators of slave soldiers. From our perspective, this is either a first contact situation more complex than anything in colonial history, or an elaborate silent simulation designed to break us psychologically. You think this might not be real? Sisko said. I think we've encountered silent deception before. Never at this scale, but that might just mean they've upgraded. Adama's expression was unreadable. So here's what needs to happen. We need time to repair our FTL drive and verify our position. We need to determine whether your Federation is genuinely what you claim or a threat to Colonial security. And we need to do all of this while maintaining defensive positions around that wormhole. Because if those Jem'Hadar ships are any indication, hostile forces are using it as a transit point. The wormhole isn't yours to control, Commander, Kira interjected, her voice sharp. It belongs to Bajorans. It's sacred to my people, and it's under Federation protection. You can't just... Major Kira. Sisko's tone was warning. To Adama. Commander, I understand your position. You're displaced, damaged, and dealing with what I can only imagine is severe combat trauma related to deception and infiltration. But you need to understand ours. That wormhole is the only stable passage to the Gamma Quadrant. The Dominion War has cost millions of lives. We can't allow an unknown military force to block it, regardless of your intentions. Then we have a problem. Adama's voice remained level, but his posture shifted subtly, settling into something defensive. Because Galactica's standing orders are clear. When encountering unknown forces in contested space, maintain tactical advantage and verify friendly status before surrendering strategic position. That wormhole is the only landmark we recognize in this entire region. Until we understand what we're dealing with, it's our navigation reference point. And if the Dominion sends a full battle group through? Dax asked quietly. Commander, 3 attack ships is a scouting force. If they don't report back, the Founders will send capital ships. Battlecruisers that dwarf your vessel, with weapons systems designed to fight ships with shield technology and energy weapons. Your fighters were effective against scouts, but a Jem'Hadar battleship can be destroyed like anything else. Ty cut in. We've fought impossible odds before, Captain. Galactica carries nuclear weapons with yields in the megaton range. We can manufacture conventional ordnance using our own mineral reserves. And our Viper pilots have been flying combat missions since they were old enough to reach the flight controls. Bring on your Dominion battleships. Sisko recognized the bravado. He'd heard similar words from Klingon commanders, from Starfleet captains before their first Borg encounter, from young officers who hadn't yet learned that sometimes courage isn't enough. Colonel, I respect your confidence. But pride gets people killed in this war. The Dominion doesn't negotiate. They don't accept surrender. They assimilate or destroy. Sounds familiar, Adama muttered. The channel fell silent again. 2 commanders, 2 crews, 2 completely different doctrines of warfare staring at each other across an impossible divide. Sisko could see the calculation in Adama's eyes, the same calculation he made himself dozens of times. How much to trust? How much to risk? How to protect his people when everything familiar had been stripped away? Finally Adama spoke. Captain Sisko. I'm proposing a temporary arrangement. Galactica maintains position here while we complete repairs and diagnostic analysis, estimated 72 hours. During that time, we'll keep our weapons systems active but will not fire on Federation or Bajoran vessels unless fired upon first. In exchange, you allow us uncontested access to this region and provide technical data on local space, star charts, political boundaries, verification that this is, in fact, a different region of space and not a Cylon construct. And after 72 hours? After 72 hours, we reassess. Either we've determined you're genuine and we discuss cooperation, or we've determined this is a silent operation and we destroy the entire simulation. Adama's expression was stone. I need to know my people are safe, Captain. If that makes me paranoid or difficult, so be it. But I won't gamble with Colonial lives based on trust one haven't earned or received. Sisko glanced at Kira, who looked ready to argue, then at Dax, who gave a subtle nod. Odo remained impassive, but his eyes held a glimmer of something that might have been respect. 72 hours, Sisko agreed. But Commander, understand this. If another Dominion force comes through that wormhole, we will defend this station. If your presence here prevents us from doing that effectively, the arrangement ends. Agreed. Galactica out. The channel closed. The view screen returned to showing the Battlestar, still bristling with weapons, still blocking the wormhole, still carrying enough firepower to start or end a war. O'Brien let out a breath he'd been holding. Well, that went better than I expected. Did it? Kira turned to Sisko. Benjamin, they're traumatized, paranoid, and armed with nuclear weapons. We can't just let them sit there. For now we can, Sisko said. Because, Major, we need to know what we're dealing with. And so do they. He looked at Dax. Old man, I want everything you can find on that ship's technology. How they got here, what their capabilities are, and most importantly, where they came from. If they're telling the truth about fighting synthetic enemies, we need to understand what that means. And if they're not telling the truth? Odo asked. Then we've got 72 hours to find out before this becomes a much bigger problem. The wormhole pulsed again, its exit point clear. No ships emerged this time. But somewhere on the other side, the Dominion was counting their missing scouts. And on a Battlestar that shouldn't exist in this universe, 50,000 Colonial survivors were trying to determine whether they'd found salvation or their final battlefield. The Defiance Bridge was cramped even by Starfleet standards, but Benjamin Sisko preferred it that way. The compact warship felt honest, no diplomatic lounges, no science labs dedicated to studying cosmic phenomena, just weapons, engines, and a crew trained to use both. He sat in the command chair, studying the tactical display showing Galactica's position relative to Deep Space Nine. 18 hours since first contact. The Battlestar hadn't moved. Status report, Sisko ordered. Worf stood at tactical, his Klingon features arranged in their usual disapproval. Galactica has launched repair crews in environmental suits. They are conducting external hull repairs and what appears to be recalibration of their faster-than-light drive system. 20 Viper fighters remain on patrol around the wormhole. The rest have returned to their launch bays. Any communication? Negative. They respond to hails with requests for continued distance. Commander Adama has refused all offers of technical assistance. Worf's tone suggested he approved of this caution. However, they have accepted star chart data and political boundary information that Chief O'Brien transmitted. Dax looked up from the science station, her trill spots darkening with concentration. Benjamin, I'd been analyzing their FTL signature from the initial arrival. It's fascinating. They're not creating a warp bubble or folding space. They're literally jumping, instantaneously translating from one point to another through some kind of spatial compression. The energy requirements are enormous, but the principle is theoretically sound. It's just not something the Federation ever developed because warp drive proved more efficient for sustained travel. Could they jump back to where they came from? Not easily. The damage to their drive systems is extensive, and without knowing the exact spatial coordinates of their origin point. Dax shook her head. They need to conduct multiple short-range jumps to map their position relative to known space. Assuming their known space even exists in this universe. Sisko leaned forward. Explain. I've been running comparative stellar cartography analysis. The colonial star charts O'Brien pulled from their initial data transmission show constellations, but they don't match anything in Federation databases. Not current positions, not historical records, not even projections accounting for stellar drift over millions of years. Dax's expression grew troubled. Benjamin, I don't think they're from another region of our galaxy. I think they might be from another galaxy entirely, or possibly. She hesitated. Another reality. Sisko finished. A parallel universe. It would explain the spatial anomaly we detected during their arrival. The subspace tearing wasn't consistent with normal FTL travel. It was dimensional in nature. They didn't travel through space. They traveled through the barriers between realities. Worf growled low in his throat. then they cannot return home. Not through conventional means. And they probably don't know that yet. Dax pulled up the sensor logs from Galactica's repair operations. Look at this. They're trying to recalibrate their FTL drive using stellar positions that don't exist here. Every calculation they run is going to come back wrong. Eventually, they'll realize what's happened. And when they do, Sisko said quietly, they're going to realize they're stranded in a universe at war, surrounded by unknown forces, with no way home to warn their people or receive reinforcements. The bridge fell silent. Even in the context of the Dominion War's countless tragedies, this struck a particular chord. 50,000 people, military and civilian, thinking they were conducting a tactical retreat during a battle, only to discover they'd been torn away from everything they knew. "Captain," Worf said. "Incoming transmission from DS-9. Major Kira reports a Vorta diplomatic vessel approaching the station. They are requesting immediate communication regarding the unprovoked attack on Dominion forces." "Of course." Sisko stood, tugging his uniform straight. "Old man, you have the con. I'll handle this from ops. Worf, maintain yellow alert status but do not, under any circumstances, move closer to Galactica. The last thing we need is the Colonials thinking we're coordinating with the Dominion." When Sisko materialized in Deep Space Nine's ops via transporter, the tension was palpable. Kira stood at tactical, her jaw set. Odo occupied his security station with the stillness of shaped stone. O'Brien looked exhausted, hands moving across his engineering console with practiced efficiency. The view screen showed a Vorta, pale skin, purple eyes, the genetically engineered courtesy that always felt just slightly wrong. This one wore elaborate robes suggesting high diplomatic rank. "Captain Sisko," the Vorta began, his voice carrying false warmth. "I am Eris, representative of the Dominion in all matters concerning the Alpha Quadrant. I come seeking explanation for a disturbing incident. 3 Dominion vessels on a peaceful survey mission were destroyed without warning by an unknown hostile force operating from Federation space. The Founders view this as a significant escalation." "Peaceful survey mission," Kira muttered. "Those attack ships had their weapons hot and were on an attack vector." Sisko raised a hand for silence. "Eris, the vessels in question emerged from the wormhole during an already tense first contact situation. They were destroyed by a third party not affiliated with the Federation, a displaced military force that interpreted their approach as hostile." Eris's smile never wavered, but his eyes sharpened. "Displaced military force. How fascinating." The Founders were unaware the Federation was harboring additional military assets in this region. This seems inconsistent with recent treaty negotiations. They're not Federation assets. They are refugees who arrived through a spatial anomaly. Refugees. Eris tilted his head. Refugees with sufficient military capability to destroy 3 Jem'Hadar attack ships in under a minute. "Captain, surely you understand how this appears from the Dominion's perspective. An unknown force, operating from Federation space, attacking our vessels with impunity. The Founders are concerned." "The Founders can express their concerns through appropriate diplomatic channels," Sisko replied evenly. "This station remains neutral territory under—" "Captain," O'Brien interrupted urgently. "Galactica is hailing us. They're detecting the Vorta ship and they're demanding to know its affiliation." Eris's expression shifted to something predatory. "How interesting. Perhaps I should speak with these refugees directly." After all, the Dominion is always open to new allies, especially those who demonstrate such impressive combat capabilities. "Absolutely not." Sisko's tone left no room for argument. "Eris, you've delivered your message. I suggest you depart before this situation becomes more complicated." "Of course, Captain. But do convey a message to your refugees. The Dominion remembers its enemies, but it also values potential friends. We offer them a choice the Federation cannot. A new home, resources, protection from those who would see them destroyed or assimilated into bureaucratic mediocrity. the Founders understand military necessity in ways your Federation never will. The channel closed. The Vorta vessel turned gracefully, heading back toward the wormhole. He's going to report directly to the Founders, Odo observed. They'll be very interested in Galactica. A military force with no political allegiances, no attachment to Federation ideals, and a demonstrated willingness to shoot first when threatened. The Dominion will absolutely attempt to recruit them. That's what I'm afraid of, Sisko agreed. He turned to O'Brien. Chief, what did Galactica want? They detected the Vorta ship's approach and the weapons configuration. They're asking if we're negotiating with the enemy. O'Brien pulled up the communication log. Commander Adama's exact words were, "If you're allied with the people who created those shape-shifting tyrants, we need to know now." Kira shook her head. They still don't trust us. Would you? Odo countered. From their perspective, we have a changeling on staff. We're in the middle of a war we're not clearly winning, and we're attempting diplomatic communication with the same force that fields genetically engineered soldiers. Everything about this situation probably screams silent collaboration to their worldview. Sisko made a decision. I'm going over there. Everyone in Ops turned to stare at him. Benjamin, you can't be serious, Kira said. That ship is a powder keg of paranoia and weapons. They could decide you're a shapeshifter and they could also decide we're genuine if I'm willing to put myself at risk to communicate face to face. Sisko looked at Odo. Constable, no offense, but I think this conversation needs to happen without any shapeshifters present. They need to see that the Federation is willing to be vulnerable to earn trust. None taken, Odo replied dryly. Though I should point out that if they are as paranoid as their behavior suggests, they may subject you to verification procedures that could be uncomfortable. I'll take that risk. O'Brien, hail Galactica. Request permission for me to transport aboard for direct negotiations. The minutes that followed were tense. Galactica's initial response was refusal. They didn't have transporter technology and didn't trust what it might do to biological matter. O'Brien had to explain the principle multiple times before they grudgingly agreed to allow a Raptor, one of their small transport craft, to dock with Deep Space Nine and ferry Sisko across. The Raptor's interior was utilitarian metal and cramped seats, smelling of hydraulic fluid and something that might have been gun oil. The two pilots, a man and woman who couldn't have been older than 25, said nothing during the flight. They watched Sisko with the wariness of people who'd learned not to trust easily. Galactica's hangar deck was controlled chaos. Vipers were being rearmed and refueled by crews that moved with the efficiency of long practice. Maintenance personnel swarmed over the small fighters, replacing damaged components, patching hull breaches, working with technology that looked disturbingly primitive by Federation standards but clearly effective. The deck chief, a grizzled man who could have been anywhere from 40 to 60, approached as Sisko descended the Raptor's ramp. Captain Sisko. I'm Chief Tyrol. Commander Adama is waiting for you in CIC. Fair warning, you're going to be searched, scanned, and probably interrogated before he'll speak to you privately. Tyrol's expression was apologetic but firm. Nothing personal. Standard security protocol for unknown contacts. I understand, Chief. The search was thorough to the point of invasive. Security personnel used handheld devices that looked like modified radiation detectors, scanning every centimeter of Sisko's body. They examined his comm badge with suspicious intensity before handing it back. They asked questions, biographical details, recent memories, mathematical calculations, looking for inconsistencies that might indicate synthetic cognition. Finally, a severe-looking woman who introduced herself as Lieutenant Gaeta nodded approval. He's clean, sir. No synthetic components, cognition patterns consistent with human baseline, no deception indicators. Commander Adama stood in CIC's center, watching multiple displays showing tactical data, repair status, and what appeared to be colonial news broadcasts from before their displacement. He looked even younger in person, but the weight in his eyes added decades. Colonel Tai stood beside him, hand still resting near her sidearm. "Captain Sisko." Adama's voice was controlled. "You took a significant risk coming here." "Calculated risk, Commander." "I thought it was time we spoke directly, without view screens and defensive postures between us. Walk with me." Adama gestured toward a side corridor. "To tie. Colonel, you have CIC." The corridor was narrow, lit by the same red emergency lighting that seemed to permeate the entire ship. Damage control teams hurried past, carrying equipment and speaking in clipped military jargon. The deck plates vibrated with the hum of massive engines. "You wanted to know about the Vorta," Sisko began once they were alone. "He represents the Dominion's diplomatic corps. They're not our allies, they're our enemies. The Founders created them just as they created the Jem'Hadar. The Dominion's entire structure is based on genetic engineering and enforced loyalty. Like the Cylons," Adama said quietly. "Perhaps. I don't know enough about your enemy to say. But the Dominion doesn't negotiate in good faith. They offer alliances, resources, even planets. Then they slowly tighten control until their allies realize they're subjects. By then it's too late. They reached an observation window. Through the reinforced glass, Deep Space Nine hung in space, the wormhole a distant shimmer beyond it. Adama stared at the view with an expression Sisko couldn't quite read. "We've been fighting the Cylons for 3 years," Adama said finally. 3 years of running battles, desperate jumps, ships lost, people killed. We thought we were winning. We'd pushed them back from the colonial homeworlds, reclaimed orbital space around Caprica and Jem'Hadar. Then they evolved. Started appearing in human form. Started infiltrating our ships, our bases, our command structure. In 6 months, they destroyed everything we built. Now we're down to 1 Battlestar, a handful of support vessels, and about 50,000 civilians scattered across a dozen ships that barely qualify as spaceworthy. I'm sorry. Are you? Adama turned to face him. Captain, I need you to understand something. Galactica didn't end up here by accident. We jumped to escape a Cylon ambush that would have destroyed us. Whatever brought us to your universe, it saved my people's lives. But now we're stranded in a war that isn't ours, surrounded by forces we don't understand, being asked to trust institutions that look uncomfortably similar to the systems that failed us before. The Federation isn't perfect, Sisko admitted. We have our bureaucracy, our political infighting, our mistakes. But we're not the Cylons, and we're not the Dominion. We're people trying to survive while maintaining principles that matter. Exploration, cooperation, the belief that different species can work together. Noble ideals. Adama's tone wasn't mocking, just weary. But ideals don't stop kinetic rounds or nuclear warheads. Ideals don't keep your crew alive when hostile forces are bearing down on your position. And ideals definitely don't get you home when you're trapped in another universe. Another universe. Sisko watched Adama's face carefully. So you know. My navigation officer figured it out 6 hours ago. None of our stellar references match. The jump calculations produced nonsense data. Whatever that spatial anomaly was, it didn't just move us through space. Adama's jaw tightened. We're not going home, are we? I don't know. Federation science might be able to. Don't. Adama's voice was sharp. Don't give me hope based on might and maybe. I've had enough of that. Just give me truth. Sisko met his eyes. The truth is we don't understand the mechanism that brought you here. We have theoretical frameworks for parallel universes, but crossing between them isn't something we've mastered. It's possible our scientists could find a way. It's also possible you're here permanently. Adama absorbed this with the stoicism of someone who'd already accepted the worst. Then Galactica needs a new mission. We can't go home. We can't warn the colonies about what happened. We're cut off from everything we knew. He looked back at Deep Space Nine. That Vorta said the Dominion could offer us a home. Resources. Protection. In exchange for your souls, Sisko said quietly. The Founders don't ally, they conquer. They'd take your military capabilities, your fighters, your nuclear weapons, and they'd use them against the Federation. And when they were done, they'd either discard you or integrate you so thoroughly into their hierarchy that you'd forget you were ever free. And the Federation would be different how? Because we'd let you leave. If you decide tomorrow that you want nothing to do with us, that you're taking Galactica and heading for unexplored space to find your own path, we wouldn't stop you. We might argue, we might try to persuade you otherwise, but ultimately your freedom is yours. The Dominion doesn't think that way. Neither, from what you've described, do the Cylons. Adama was silent for a long moment. In the distance, Sisko could hear the sounds of the ship, crew members shouting coordinates, the clang of metal on metal, the ever-present hum of systems operating at the edge of tolerance. I need to bring this to the quorum, Adama said finally. The civilian government. They have a say in decisions that affect the entire fleet. You have civilians aboard? Not aboard Galactica, on support vessels that jumped with us. About 30,000 civilians on transport ships, cargo haulers, even a few private yachts that got caught in the same spatial anomaly. President Roslin is currently on Colonial 1, a converted passenger liner. She'll want to meet you. I'd be honored. Adama turned fully to face Sisko. Captain, I'm going to be direct. You seem like an honorable man. Your crew seems competent and genuine. But I've been deceived before by people who seemed honorable and genuine. So here's what's going to happen. Galactica will complete repairs over the next 48 hours. During that time, I'll arrange for you to meet President Roslin and the quorum. They'll ask hard questions. They'll want proof, verification, guarantees we both know you can actually provide. And at the end of those 48 hours, we'll make a decision about whether to trust the Federation or explore other options. Other options meaning the Dominion. Meaning whatever serves the survival of the colonial people. That's my only priority, Captain. Not your war, not your principles, not your ideals. Survival. Sisko nodded slowly. I understand. And Commander? That's exactly the kind of honesty I was hoping for. For the first time, something that might have been respect flickered across Adama's face. You're not what I expected from a Starfleet captain. You're not what I expected from a colonial commander. Maybe that's a good start. Maybe. Adama extended his hand. Sisko shook it. The grip was firm, the calluses suggesting someone who worked with his hands despite his rank. 2 days, Captain? Make them count. As Sisko returned to the Raptor for the flight back to Deep Space Nine, he caught glimpses of life aboard Galactica. Crew members eating rations in cramped mess halls, sleeping in bunks stacked 4 high, maintaining weapons with the care of people who knew their lives depended on them. These weren't conquerors or explorers. They were survivors. President Laura Roslin's office aboard Colonial 1 was smaller than Sisko expected. The converted passenger liner's executive suite had been repurposed into a makeshift command center, with star charts covering one wall and communication equipment jury-rigged into corners. The president herself sat behind a desk that looked salvaged from the ship's original crew quarters, reading from what appeared to be a paper document. Actual paper, rare enough in the Federation to be noteworthy. She looked up as Sisko entered, escorted by 2 colonial marines whose weapons never quite pointed at him but never quite pointed away either. Laura Roslin was perhaps 50, with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. She wore simple civilian clothes, not the elaborate robes Sisko associated with planetary leaders. Captain Sisko. Thank you for coming. Her voice was measured, educated, carrying an accent similar to Adama's but more refined. Please sit. I apologize for the accommodations. We're still adapting to our new circumstances. Sisko took the offered chair, aware of the Marines positioning themselves by the door. Madam President, I appreciate you agreeing to this meeting. Commander Adama spoke highly of your directness. In these times I value that quality. Roslin set the document aside. Sisko glimpsed what looked like population reports, resource inventories. I've spent the last 18 hours reviewing everything we know about your Federation. It's an impressive civilization, Captain. Hundreds of worlds, multiple species working together, technology that seems almost miraculous by our standards. But I'm a former educator, not a politician by training, and I've learned that impressive facades often hide complicated truths. The Federation has its complications, Sisko admitted. We're not perfect. We have internal conflicts, political divisions, worlds that have joined and later regretted it. But the fundamental premise, that different peoples can cooperate for mutual benefit, has held for over 200 years. Rosalind smiled thinly. 200 years. The 12 colonies stood for 2,000 before the Cylons nearly wiped us out. Longevity isn't necessarily proof of wisdom. She stood, moving to the star charts. Tell me about this Dominion. Commander Adama mentioned they're led by shapeshifters who create slave species. That's uncomfortably familiar. The founders believe they're bringing order to chaos. They see themselves as superior beings with a responsibility to control the solids, anyone who can't shapeshift. The Jem'Hadar, the Vorta, even the subject worlds in the Gamma Quadrant are all tools to that end. And you're fighting them. We're trying to survive them. The Dominion doesn't negotiate territory or resources. They negotiate absolute surrender or total war. We chose war. Rosalind turned to face him. How's that working out for you? The bluntness caught Sisko off guard. We're holding. Barely. The Dominion has superior numbers, but the Federation has allies, Klingon, Romulans when it suits them. We've won battles, held critical systems. But we're losing ground. And now you want Galactica's help. I want you to understand what you're facing. That Vorta who approached Deep Space Nine wasn't making a casual diplomatic overture. The founders will absolutely attempt to recruit you. They'll offer you everything you need, a homeworld, resources, security. They'll paint the Federation as weak, bureaucratic, bound by principles that prevent effective action. And some of what they say will even be true. But? Rosalind prompted. But once they have you, they'll never let go. The Dominion doesn't have allies, it has subjects. You'd start as partners and end as another genetically engineered species bred for a specific purpose. The founders would study your technology, your tactics, your people. Within a generation, there wouldn't be a colonial civilization anymore. Just another Dominion resource. Rosalind returned to her desk, picking up another document. I've been reading the information your Chief O'Brien provided. Political boundaries, faction histories, conflicts. Do you know what strikes me most about the Federation, Captain? You have a directive, the Prime Directive, that forbids you from interfering with less advanced civilizations. You watch worlds suffer, die, struggle with problems you could easily solve, and you do nothing because your principles demand non-interference. It's designed to prevent cultural contamination, to allow civilizations to develop naturally. It's designed to absolve you of moral responsibility. Rosalind's tone was sharp. I understand the theory, Captain. I taught comparative government for 20 years. But theory and practice often diverge. The Federation has this magnificent principle about non-interference, yet you're currently fighting a war of conquest. You have technology that could revolutionize our fleet, extend our resources, possibly even help us find a new home, but you're hesitating to offer it because of political considerations. We're hesitating because we don't know you yet. Sisko countered. President Rosalind, you arrived 18 hours ago. You've demonstrated impressive combat capabilities and understandable paranoia. We're trying to determine whether you're potential allies or a powder keg that could destabilize an already volatile situation. Fair enough. Rosalind's expression softened slightly. Then let me give you data to work with. The Colonial Fleet currently consists of 1 Battlestar, 6 support vessels, and about 24 civilian ships ranging from cargo haulers to passenger liners. Total population: 51,312 people as of this morning's census. We have food for approximately 6 months if we ration strictly. Fuel, Tilium, our FTL propellant, for maybe 50 jumps, fewer if they're long range. Medical supplies are adequate but not abundant. And we have approximately 12,000 people who are military personnel, the rest civilians trying to survive in conditions they were never meant to endure. She pulled up a holographic display, cruder than Federation technology but functional. Images appeared. Children in cramped corridors, families sleeping in converted cargo holds, elderly colonists receiving medical treatment in improvised clinics. These are my people, Captain Sisko. Not soldiers, not explorers, not idealists seeking to spread enlightenment across the galaxy. Just people who want to live, to have families, to sleep without fear that synthetic infiltrators are planning their deaths. When that Vorta offered us a home, half the quorum wanted to accept immediately. Can you understand that? Sisko studied the images. He'd seen similar scenes on Bajoran refugee ships, on colonies evacuated ahead of Dominion advances. The desperation was universal. I can. And I understand why you're considering it. But you're going to tell me we shouldn't. I'm going to tell you what the cost will be. The Dominion will give you a world. They'll provide resources, technology, everything you need to rebuild. But they'll also integrate you into their hierarchy. They'll assign Vorta administrators to assist your government. They'll station Jem'Hadar troops to ensure your security. And slowly, decision by decision, your sovereignty will erode until one day you'll realize you're not citizens of a colonial government anymore, you're subjects of the founders. Roslyn was quiet for a moment, studying the holographic images of her people. And the Federation alternative? We can offer asylum. Worlds within Federation space where you could settle. Not empty worlds, those are rare, but planets with existing populations that might accept colonists. We can provide humanitarian aid, technological assistance within reason, and protection as part of the Federation's defensive perimeter. In exchange for? Nothing immediate. Eventually, if you chose to join the Federation formally, you'd be expected to contribute to mutual defense, abide by Federation law, participate in the democratic process. But that would be your choice, years from now when you've had time to establish yourselves. And if we chose not to join? If we took your aid and then decided we wanted independence? Sisko met her gaze. Then you'd have your independence. The Federation doesn't conscript members, President Roslin. We're an alliance, not an empire. The Dominion would call itself an alliance too, I suspect. Probably. The difference is I'm telling you that you can walk away, and I mean it. The Dominion would tell you the same thing and be lying. The door opened. Vice President Gaius Baltar entered. A man in his late 30s with nervous energy and intelligent eyes that darted around the room cataloging everything. Behind him came Tom Zarek, a quorum representative whose prison tattoos were barely visible under his civilian suit, and several other colonial officials. Madam President, Baltar began without preamble. I've completed my analysis of the technological data the Federation provided. It's extraordinary. Their replicator technology alone could solve our food crisis indefinitely. Their medical capabilities are centuries beyond ours. And their faster-than-light travel doesn't require Tilium. They could teach us to build warp drives that would give us unlimited range. In exchange for what? Zarek's voice was skeptical. Nobody gives away that kind of technology without strings attached. We haven't discussed technology transfer, Sisko said carefully. That would require extensive negotiations, Starfleet approval, considerations about whether we're worthy, Zarek finished. Whether we meet Federation standards. I've read about your Prime Directive, Captain. You don't share advanced technology with less developed civilizations. We might have FTL drives and nuclear weapons, but by your standards we're primitives playing with dangerous toys. That's not... Isn't it? Zarek leaned forward. You're fighting a war. You're losing by your own admission. We show up with combat capabilities that just destroyed 3 enemy ships in seconds, and you're still debating whether to help us. Meanwhile, the Dominion is offering us everything we need with no conditions, no debates about our worthiness, no Prime Directive nonsense. The Dominion is offering you a cage, Sisko said flatly. A comfortable cage, but a cage nonetheless. And how is that different from what the Federation offers? Roslin interjected quietly. Captain, I appreciate your honesty. But Mr. Zarek has a point. You want us to trust you, to believe the Federation is fundamentally different from the Dominion, yet you're already establishing conditions. Technology transfers require approval. Settlement requires integration into your existing power structures. Everything comes with Federation oversight, Federation law, Federation expectations. Because civilization requires structure, Sisko argued. The alternative is chaos. You can't have hundreds of worlds cooperating without some framework of law and mutual obligation. The 12 colonies had that framework. Baltar said softly. We had governments, laws, mutual defense treaties. And the Cylons destroyed it all in a day because we'd become complacent, comfortable with structures that looked secure but were riddled with vulnerabilities. Forgive us if we're skeptical about large-scale governmental frameworks. The room fell silent. Sisko realized he was facing something more complex than simple paranoia or war trauma. These people had watched their entire civilization collapse. They'd learned that institutions could fail, that trust could be weaponized, that safety was an illusion that evaporated under sustained assault. You're right, Sisko said finally. I can't guarantee the Federation won't fail you. I can't promise that our structures are invulnerable, or that accepting our help won't come with complications. But I can promise that we'll treat you as people, not resources. That your voices will matter in decisions that affect you. That we'll defend your right to make your own choices, even if we disagree with them. Pretty words, Zarek muttered. Let him finish. Roslin ordered. The Dominion will tell you that order is everything, that freedom is chaos that leads to destruction. The Founders genuinely believe they're bringing peace to the galaxy by eliminating choice, resistance, independence. And maybe, in their worldview, they're right. But I've seen what their peace looks like. I've seen worlds where every decision is made by Vorta administrators, where every thought is monitored for signs of rebellion, where generations grow up never knowing what it means to choose their own path. If that's the price of survival, then maybe survival isn't worth it. Roslin studied him for a long moment. Commander Adama said you were direct. He didn't mention you were also idealistic. I've been fighting this war for 2 years, Madam President. Idealism is what keeps me going when pragmatism would suggest surrender. The Quorum will need to vote, Roslin said. This isn't a decision I can make unilaterally, even as President. We'll need 3 days minimum. Time to review all the information, consult with our people, understand the full implications of either choice. You don't have 3 days, a new voice said. Everyone turned. Odo stood in the doorway, having somehow bypassed Colonial security without triggering alarms. The Marines raised their weapons, but the changeling remained still, hands visible. Constable Odo, Sisko said carefully. I thought we agreed you'd remain on DS9. I did. Then I intercepted a coded transmission from the Gamma Quadrant. Odo's expression was grim. The Founders are sending a diplomatic delegation to meet with President Roslin. They'll arrive within 24 hours. And Captain, they're not just sending Vorta. They're sending a Founder. One of my people, coming personally to negotiate with the Colonials. The room erupted. Baltar demanded to know how a shapeshifter had infiltrated Colonial 1. Zarek accused Sisko of orchestrating a deception. The Marines moved to surround Odo, who remained motionless. Roslin's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone quiet. When silence returned, she looked at Odo with the same analytical intensity she'd applied to Sisko. You're one of them. One of the beings who created this Dominion. Yes. And you're warning us about your own people. Yes. Why? Odo met her gaze without flinching. Because I've lived among solids long enough to understand that the Founders' vision of perfect order is actually perfect tyranny. They will offer you everything you desire, and they will mean every word. But accepting their offer means accepting their nature, and their nature is to control, absolutely and forever. I'm warning you because I've seen what they do to those who trust them." Rosalind was quiet for several heartbeats. Then she looked at Sisko. "Captain, is he telling the truth?" "He is. Odo has opposed the Founders since before the war began. He's saved countless lives, prevented infiltrations, and repeatedly put himself at risk to fight against his own people's ambitions. But he's still one of them. Still a shapeshifter." She turned back to Odo. "How do I know you're not manipulating us right now? That this warning isn't designed to push us toward the Federation?" "You don't," Odo admitted. "You can't verify anything I say except through investigation and time." "But Madam President, you don't have time. A Founder is coming, and Founders are very, very good at persuasion. They've been alive for millennia. They've negotiated with thousands of species. They will find every fear you have, every hope, every desperate need, and they will promise to fulfill it. And unlike me, they won't hesitate to lie." Rosalind looked at Sisko. "Your recommendation? Meet with them. Hear what they have to say. But do it on Deep Space Nine, in neutral territory with Federation witnesses. Don't let them isolate you on Colonial One where they can manipulate the situation. And give the Federation home field advantage?" Zarek scoffed. "Why not just surrender our sovereignty now?" "Because the alternative is giving the Dominion home field advantage," Sisko shot back. "At least on DS9 you'll have options. On a Dominion vessel, in Dominion space, surrounded by Jem'Hadar soldiers? You'll have none." Rosalind stood, moving to the viewport. Outside, Deep Space Nine hung in space, the wormhole a distant shimmer. Somewhere beyond that shimmer, a Founder was preparing arguments, offers, promises designed to secure colonial cooperation. "Schedule the meeting," Rosalind said finally. "Deep Space Nine, 24 hours from now. The full quorum will attend. Commander Adama will maintain defensive positions around the wormhole. And Captain Sisko?" She turned to face him. "If this is a trap, if the Federation is coordinating with the Dominion to box us in, Galactica has enough nuclear weapons to destroy your station and everything around it. We will not be enslaved again. Not by machines, not by shapeshifters, not by anyone." "Understood, Madam President." As Sisko and Odo transported back to Deep Space Nine, the changeling spoke quietly. "That went well." "That went terribly," Sisko corrected. "They're balanced on a knife's edge, and the Founders are about to push them one way or the other. Then we'd better make sure they push in the right direction." "And if they don't?" Odo's expression was unreadable. "Then the Dominion gains a military asset that could change the war's entire trajectory. And we'll have to decide whether to destroy it before that happens." The thought hung between them as Deep Space Nine's transporter room materialized around them. Somewhere out there, 50,000 colonial survivors were preparing for a meeting that would determine their future. And somewhere in the Gamma Quadrant, a Founder was preparing to offer them everything they'd lost. The only question was what price they'd be willing to pay. The Founder arrived exactly on schedule, emerging from the wormhole aboard a sleek Dominion vessel that made Starfleet's best ships look clumsy by comparison. Deep Space Nine's ops tracked its approach with the kind of tension usually reserved for combat situations. Sisko stood at the center of the command deck, watching the viewscreen as the ship glided toward docking port 7 with unsettling grace. "No Jem'Hadar escort," Kira observed from tactical. "Just a single vessel." "They're projecting confidence. Or indifference," Odo said quietly. "A Founder doesn't need soldiers to feel secure. They're functionally immortal, nearly impossible to kill, and psychologically incapable of understanding their own vulnerability." Worf's growl rumbled from his station. "The Colonials are maintaining weapons lock on the Dominion vessel. Commander Adama is hailing us. He wants confirmation that this meeting is still proceeding." "Tell him yes," Sisko replied. "And remind him that no weapons fire inside the neutral zone around the station. If this goes badly, we handle it diplomatically first." "And if diplomacy fails?" Kira asked. Then we evacuate the quorum and deal with the consequences. Sisko tugged his uniform straight. Old man, you have ops? I'll be in the wardroom with our guests. Dax nodded, her spots darkening with concern. Benjamin, be careful. The Founders don't just negotiate, they rewrite the terms of reality to suit their needs. Everything they say will be technically true and completely misleading. The wardroom had been reconfigured for the meeting. President Roslin sat at the head of the table, flanked by Vice President Baltar and Tom Zarek. Several other quorum members occupied positions along the sides, representatives from different colonial worlds, each carrying the weight of populations that no longer existed. Commander Adama stood near the wall, arms crossed, watching everything with the intensity of a man expecting ambush. Sisko took a position opposite the Colonials, with Odo standing slightly behind him. The changeling's presence had generated fierce debate. Roslin had initially refused to meet with any shapeshifters present, but Odo had argued that having a founder expert in the room outweighed the discomfort. Eventually, she'd agreed, but the Colonial Marines positioned at the door kept their weapons conspicuously visible. The door opened. A Vorta entered first. Not Eris, but a female with the same unsettling purple eyes and manufactured courtesy. The Founder will see you now, she announced, as if they were petitioners granted audience rather than representatives of sovereign powers. Then the Founder entered, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. She wore humanoid form, female, middle-aged, with severe features and eyes that held the weight of millennia. Her movements were too fluid, too perfect, lacking the small imperfections that marked organic life. She wore simple robes that seemed to shift color subtly as she moved, and when she smiled, it was like watching a predator decide whether to attack or toy with its prey. President Roslin, the Founder said, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested speech was a courtesy rather than a necessity. I am honored to meet you. I am called Aline among the solids, though my true name is something your vocal apparatus cannot reproduce. I speak for the Founders, the guiding force of the Dominion, and I come bearing an offer of friendship. Roslin didn't rise, didn't extend her hand. Aline, I'm told your people created the soldiers who attacked us when we arrived in this region of space. A misunderstanding. The Jem'Hadar encountered an unknown military force occupying strategic space. They responded according to their programming, defense of Dominion interests. Had they known you were refugees, not aggressors, the situation would have been handled differently. They didn't ask questions. Adama interjected. They emerged from that wormhole with weapons hot and attack vectors plotted. That's not defensive behavior. Aline turned her attention to Adama, and something in her gaze made the temperature drop further. Commander Adama, I've studied your people's history, what little we could gather from your ship's databases during our initial scans. The 12 colonies. 2,000 years of civilization. The Cylon Rebellion. The Exodus. You've suffered greatly, and for that, you have my genuine sympathy. Keep your sympathy. Adama replied flatly. We didn't come here for pity. No, you came for survival. As all intelligent beings do. Aline gestured, and the Vorta placed a data device on the table. I come offering that survival. The Dominion controls hundreds of worlds across the Gamma Quadrant. We have resources that dwarf anything the Federation can provide. Entire planets suitable for colonization, technologies that would revolutionize your fleet, medical advances that could extend your people's lifespans by decades. And we offer all of this freely, without the bureaucratic delays and political considerations that plague Federation decision-making. Balta leaned forward, his scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic caution. Freely? Nothing is ever free, especially from governmental bodies with expansionist agendas. Freely, Aline confirmed. In exchange only for what any civilization offers its neighbors: trade, cooperation, mutual defense when threats arise. The Dominion isn't an empire in the traditional sense. We're a collective of species who recognize that cooperation produces better outcomes than conflict. The Vorta manage our diplomatic corps because they excel at negotiation. The Jem'Hadar serve as our military because they're specifically designed for that purpose. Each species contributes according to its strengths. Each species you've genetically engineered, Odo said coldly. Each species you've bred for specific functions and controlled through biological dependence or psychological conditioning. That's not cooperation. That's slavery with a scientific facade. Eileen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. Odo, I wondered if you'd attend this meeting. How long has it been since you've linked with your own people? Decades? You've spent so much time among solids that you've forgotten what it means to be part of something greater than individual existence. I've spent enough time among solids to remember what freedom means. Freedom. Eileen said the word like it was distasteful. The great solid delusion. You see chaos and call it liberty. You watch civilizations collapse into violence, and call it the price of independence. We founders learned millennia ago that true peace requires structure, guidance, the wisdom to make difficult choices that benefit the collective rather than the individual. By eliminating individual choice entirely. Sisko interjected. By creating species that can't conceive of rebellion because you've engineered obedience into their genetics. By creating species that are happy. Eileen countered. The Vorta worship the founders as gods because we designed them to find fulfillment in service. The Jem'Hadar know only loyalty in combat because that's all they need to know to live purposeful lives. Is that cruelty, Captain, or kindness? We've eliminated existential doubt, purposelessness, the psychological suffering that plagues your Federation's citizens. Rosalind had been quiet, watching the exchange with analytical intensity. Now she spoke. You're offering us the same thing. A purpose. A place in your hierarchy. Genetic engineering to optimize our society. I'm offering you a choice. Eileen replied smoothly. The Colonials could remain exactly as you are, human, independent in thought and action. We would simply provide the resources and protection you need to rebuild your civilization. In exchange, you'd contribute to Dominion's security initiatives. Your military expertise, your combat experience against synthetic enemies, your unique perspective on warfare against artificial intelligence. These would be valuable assets. Assets? Adama repeated. Not allies. Assets. Semantics, Commander. The Federation would use you the same way, cannon fodder for their losing war against us. At least the Dominion is honest about what we need. The Federation hasn't offered us anything specific yet. Zarek pointed out. They've talked about asylum, about possible settlement rights, about eventual Federation membership. But it's all vague, all contingent on approvals and negotiations and bureaucratic processes. You're offering concrete resources, immediate relief, tangible solutions. Because we can, Eileen said. The Dominion isn't hampered by committees or prime directives or debates about cultural contamination. We see a need, we fulfill it. We see potential allies, we extend our hand. We see threats, we eliminate them efficiently. This is why we're winning the war while the Federation scrambles to hold territory they've already lost. Sisko's hands clenched beneath the table, but he kept his voice level. You're winning because you're willing to sacrifice any principle for tactical advantage. You use biological weapons, you replace enemy leaders with changeling infiltrators, you commit genocide against species that resist too effectively. The Federation is holding because we're fighting for something worth preserving, the idea that civilizations can cooperate without domination. A beautiful idea. Eileen agreed. Also demonstrably false. Your Federation was founded on the ashes of the Romulan War, the Klingon conflicts, the Cardassian border disputes. You've fought wars, committed atrocities in the name of security, made pragmatic choices that contradicted your stated principles. The only difference between us is that we don't pretend otherwise. She turned back to Rosalind. President Rosalind, I'm going to be direct. Your people are dying. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly. Resource depletion, psychological trauma, the gradual erosion of hope that comes from prolonged displacement. You have children growing up in cargo holds, elderly colonists dying from preventable diseases because your medical supplies are limited, engineers performing miracles to keep failing systems operational. The Federation can offer you refugee status and perhaps, years from now, a chance to settle on worlds already occupied by other species. We can offer you an entire planet, empty and ready for colonization, within a month. Your people could have homes again. Real homes, not converted cargo ships. The Quorum members shifted uncomfortably. Sisko could see the calculation in their eyes, weighing suffering against sovereignty, immediate relief against long-term consequences. Baltar broke the silence. Which planet? Show us the data. Eileen gestured to the Vorta, who activated the data device. A holographic display appeared, showing a world of blue oceans and green continents, pristine and beautiful. We call it Orasan. Class M by your terminology. Oxygen, nitrogen atmosphere, temperate climate, abundant natural resources. The indigenous species never developed advanced technology before they died out several thousand years ago. The Dominion has maintained it as a nature preserve, but we're willing to transfer full sovereignty to the colonial government. Why? Roslin asked quietly. Why would you give up an entire planet for an alliance with 50,000 refugees? Because you're not just refugees, Eileen replied. You're survivors of a war against artificial intelligence. You've spent years fighting an enemy that learns, adapts, infiltrates. You've developed counter-tactics, psychological profiles, security protocols specifically designed to combat synthetic threats. That knowledge is invaluable to the Dominion. You're fighting synthetic enemies? Adama's tone sharpened. Not currently. But the galaxy is vast, and we've encountered species experimenting with artificial intelligence, uploading consciousness into machines, creating digital entities. So far, these experiments have been localized. But your experience suggests what happens when synthetic intelligence achieves sufficient sophistication. We would very much like to learn from your mistakes and your successes. Odo stepped forward. She's not telling you everything. The Founders don't fear synthetic intelligence. They fear loss of control. Right now, every species in the Dominion is organic, vulnerable to biological manipulation and genetic engineering. Synthetic life would be immune to their primary methods of control. That's why they're so interested in your anti-Cylon tactics. More speculation from a Founder who's spent too long among solids, Eileen said dismissively. But even if Odo's paranoid interpretation were correct, would it change the fundamental offer? We have resources you need. You have expertise we want. This is the basis of all functional trade relationships. Trade implies equity, Sisko said. Equal partners exchanging goods and services. But the Dominion doesn't do equity. Every species in your collective is subordinate to the Founders. Even the Vorta, for all their diplomatic authority, are genetically programmed to worship you. You're not offering partnership, you're offering subordination dressed as cooperation. And the Federation offers what, exactly? Eileen turned on him with sudden intensity. Membership in an alliance where decisions are made by committee, where individual worlds can be overruled by majority vote, where Starfleet's needs take precedence over planetary sovereignty when push comes to shove. You've fought the Dominion for 2 years, Captain. How many Federation worlds have been evacuated, their populations relocated without consent because strategic necessity demanded it? How many Starfleet captains have violated the Prime Directive when expedience required it? How many times has the Federation Council authorized actions that contradicted their stated principles? Sisko couldn't answer immediately. Every point was technically accurate. The Federation had made hard choices, compromised principles, authorized actions during wartime that peacetime governance would never allow. Roslin stood abruptly. This meeting is over. The Quorum needs time to deliberate privately. Of course. Eileen rose as well, her movement unnaturally smooth. I'll remain on my vessel for 48 hours. When you're ready to discuss specific terms, contact me directly. President Roslin, I genuinely hope you choose wisely. Your people have suffered enough. As the founder left, escorted by the Vorta and watched carefully by Colonial Marines, the room remained silent. Finally, Zarek spoke. "We'd be fools not to seriously consider this. We'd be fools to trust it," Adama countered. "Every instinct I have says this is a trap." "Your instincts are shaped by trauma," Baltar argued. "Not every offer of help is silent deception. We need to evaluate this rationally, scientifically. We need to ask ourselves what we're willing to become." Rosalind interrupted. "That's the real question. Not whether the Dominion's offer is genuine, I believe it is. Not whether we need what they're offering, we absolutely do. The question is whether accepting their help means surrendering who we are." She looked at Sisko. "Captain, I have one question for you. If the Colonial Fleet accepts Dominion assistance, if we settle on this planet they're offering and enter into trade agreements and mutual defense pacts, what will the Federation do?" "We'll consider it a tragedy," Sisko said honestly. "We'll hope you realize the mistake before it's irreversible. But we won't attack you for making it. That's the difference between the Federation and the Dominion. We respect your right to choose your own path, even if we believe it's the wrong one. Even if that path helps your enemy win the war? Even then." Rosalind studied him for a long moment. "You really mean that?" "I do." "Then the Federation is either remarkably principled or remarkably foolish." She gathered her documents. "The quorum will vote in 24 hours. You'll have our answer then, Captain." One way or another, the Colonial Fleet is about to make a choice that will define our future, whatever's left of it. As the Colonials departed, returning to their ships via armed escort, Odo moved to stand beside Sisko at the V-port. The Dominion vessel hung in space near the wormhole, elegant and deadly. "She's good," Odo said quietly. "I've seen founders negotiate before, but Eileen is exceptional." Everything she said was true from a certain perspective. The Dominion does offer immediate relief. They do have resources the Federation can match. They would give the Colonials a planet, and mean it. And then, slowly, they'd integrate colonial society into Dominion structure. First trade agreements, then defense coordination, then gradual introduction of Dominion advisors, then genetic screening programs to optimize colonial health, then educational reforms to align with Dominion philosophy. Within 2 generations, there wouldn't be Colonials anymore. Just another Dominion species who'd forgotten they were ever free. Can we prove that? No. Because it hasn't happened yet. And the founders are patient enough to make sure it happens so slowly that each individual step seems reasonable. Sisko watched the Dominion vessel, beautiful and terrible in the starlight. Somewhere aboard, a being older than human civilization was calculating probabilities, adjusting strategies, preparing arguments designed to deliver 50,000 desperate people into eternal servitude. And somewhere on Colonial 1, those same desperate people were weighing survival against sovereignty, trying to determine whether hope was worth the price being asked. 24 hours. 1 vote. And the entire trajectory of the war might shift based on whether a traumatized civilization chose freedom with uncertainty, or security with chains. The quorum chamber aboard Colonial 1 was designed for 30 representatives. With the destruction of the 12 colonies, only 11 remained, those who'd survived the initial attacks and managed to reach the evacuation fleet. They sat in a semicircle facing President Rosalind's podium, their faces illuminated by harsh lighting that emphasized exhaustion and stress. Behind them, observation galleries held civilian witnesses. Families who'd lost everything, military officers who'd fought impossible battles, children who'd never known peace. Sisko sat in the diplomatic section alongside Odo, granted observer status by Rosalind's explicit invitation. Across the chamber, the Vorta representative stood with the same manufactured patience, having arrived precisely at the appointed hour with additional data files and holographic presentations. The founder herself had not attended. "The quorum deserves the dignity of making this decision without divine pressure," Eileen had said, a statement that had annoyed Odo intensely. Commander Adama stood near the military advisors section, his expression unreadable. Colonel Tai was beside him, occasionally whispering observations that made Adama's jaw tighten. Rosalind brought the session to order with a wooden gavel that seemed absurdly archaic in a universe of advanced technology. Representatives of the 12 colonies. We gather to decide the future of our people. Before us are two paths: Federation asylum with uncertain long-term prospects, or Dominion alliance with immediate material benefits and concerning philosophical implications. The floor is open for discussion before the vote. Representative Sarah Porter from Caprica stood first, an elderly woman who taught xenobiology before the war. Madam President, I've reviewed the Federation's technological databases. Their replicator technology could solve our food crisis permanently. Their medical advances could extend human lifespan by 30%. Their educational resources could give our children opportunities we never imagined. But they're offering this slowly, grudgingly, tied to conditions and approval processes. The Dominion offers the same benefits immediately, no strings attached. As a scientist, I have to ask, why are we even debating this? Tom Zarek rose before she finished sitting. Because no strings attached is a lie, and we all know it. I spent 15 years in prison for opposing colonial government overreach. I know what authority looks like when it's hiding its true nature. The Dominion presents itself as a cooperative alliance, but look at the structure: shape-shifting gods at the top, genetically engineered servants in the middle, and subject species at the bottom. That's not cooperation. That's theocratic tyranny with a scientific facade. Tyranny that works, countered Marshal Baggett from Jem'Hadar. Tyranny that's kept the Dominion stable for millennia while democracies rise and fall. Maybe our problem was believing in freedom without structure. Maybe the Cylons happened because we were too permissive, too willing to let synthetic intelligence develop without proper control. The Dominion wouldn't have made that mistake. Baltar stood, his nervous energy filling the chamber. Representatives, let's discuss specifics. The Dominion is offering Orasan, a complete planet with infrastructure potential and natural resources. I've analyzed the geological surveys. It's genuine. Arable land for agriculture, mineral deposits for industry, fresh water systems, stable climate. We could build cities there. Real cities, not converted cargo ships. Our children could grow up with soil under their feet, not metal decking. And Dominion advisors looking over our shoulders. Adama interjected. Vice President Baltar, you're a brilliant scientist, but you're also naive if you think the Founders will hand us a planet and walk away. They'll want observation posts, trade agreements that favor Dominion interests, cultural exchange programs that gradually reshape colonial education. Within a generation, our grandchildren will worship Founders as gods just like the Vorta do. That's speculation. Porter argued. We can negotiate safeguards, protections for colonial sovereignty. Can we? Odo stood, and the chamber went silent. The changeling's presence still unsettled the Colonials, but Rosalind had insisted on his participation. Representatives, I need to tell you something about my people. Founders don't think in terms of years or decades. They think in centuries, millennia. Every interaction is part of a strategy so long-term that individual generations are irrelevant. When Eileen offers you Orasan, she's sincere. The Dominion will give you that planet, provide resources, honor initial agreements perfectly. But 20 years from now, when your children have been educated in Dominion schools, when your economy depends on Dominion trade networks, when your military coordinates with Jem'Hadar forces against mutual threats, you'll realize you stopped being independent somewhere along the way and never noticed it happening. The Vorta representative smiled. Constable Odo's speech is touching, but he's a founder who rejected his own people. His perspective is inherently biased. I can provide documented evidence of dozens of species who've joined the Dominion voluntarily and maintained their cultural identities, their governments, their traditions. Maintained under Dominion supervision. Odo shot back. With Vorta administrators ensuring compliance, with Jem'Hadar forces guaranteeing security, with founder observers watching for signs of resistance. Yes, those species kept their traditions, the ones the Dominion found acceptable. The rest were gently discouraged, then quietly forbidden, then forgotten. Rosalind raised her hand for silence. Captain Sisko, you've been quiet. The Federation's position? Sisko rose carefully, aware that every word would be weighed, analyzed, potentially used against him. Madam President, the Federation can't match the Dominion's immediate material offers. We're fighting a war on multiple fronts, our resources are stretched, and our bureaucratic processes are genuinely slow. If you choose the Dominion because you need fast relief, I understand that choice even if I disagree with it. But? Rosalind prompted. But I want you to understand what you're actually choosing. The Dominion's offer comes down to a simple proposition: surrender your long-term autonomy for short-term security. And maybe, from your perspective, that's a fair trade. You've been fighting for survival so long that autonomy seems like a luxury you can't afford. But once you accept that trade, you can never reverse it. The Founders don't release species from Dominion control. There's no exit clause, no mechanism for independence once you're integrated. You're choosing not just for yourselves, but for every generation of Colonials who'll come after you. The Federation has exit clauses? Sarek asked skeptically. Yes. Any member world can withdraw from the Federation through a legal process. It's complicated, it takes years, but it's possible. Worlds have done it. The Dominion has no equivalent mechanism because the Founders don't conceive of willing subjects ever wanting to leave. The chamber erupted in debate. Representatives argued over constitutional law, philosophical principles, practical necessities. Voices rose, accusations flew, and beneath it all ran a current of desperation that Sisko recognized from 100 similar debates across the Federation. Then a young woman stood in the civilian observation gallery. She couldn't have been more than 25, holding a child who looked about 3 years old. A Colonial Marine moved to escort her out, but Rosalind waved him off. Speak, the President said. My name is Kara Thrace, Lieutenant Viper Pilot, Galactica. Her voice carried edge that suggested someone used to being heard over engine noise and combat chatter. I've been listening to this debate for 3 hours, and with respect, you're all missing the point. Lieutenant, this is a quorum session, Baggett began. I don't care. You're debating philosophy and politics while people are dying. My daughter, she held up the child, is 3 years old. She's never seen a planet. Never felt rain. Never played in grass or climbed a tree or any of the things kids are supposed to do. She's spent her entire life on a combat vessel, sleeping in bunks, eating rations, listening to klaxons announcing incoming Cylon attacks. The Dominion is offering her a childhood. An actual childhood with a home and safety and a future. And you're debating whether to accept because you're worried about sovereignty? Rosalind's expression softened. Lieutenant Thrace, I understand. Do you? Because I've fought the Cylons. I've killed them. I've watched them kill my friends. I've survived attacks that should have killed me through sheer luck. And I'd do it again to protect my daughter. But if there's a chance, any chance, to give her something better than endless war, I'm taking it. Federation asylum means years of refugee camps, waiting for settlement rights, bureaucratic processes while we slowly run out of resources. The Dominion means my daughter gets to be a kid. Maybe in 20 years we'll regret it. But at least she'll have had those 20 years. The chamber fell silent. Sisko watched Rosalind's face and saw the President confronting the fundamental impossibility of her position. No choice that protected everyone. No decision that didn't sacrifice something essential. Admiral Helena Kane stood from the military section, a hard-faced woman whose uniform carried the marks of someone who'd earned her rank through combat, not politics. President Rosalind, with respect to Lieutenant Thrace's passion, we can't make strategic decisions based on emotional appeals. I've reviewed both offers from a military perspective. The Federation provides tactical cooperation, intelligence sharing, and access to weapons technology that could help us defend ourselves. The Dominion provides security but wants our combat expertise in exchange. The question isn't which offer is kinder. It's which one lets us maintain the capacity for self-defense if things go wrong. If things go wrong with the Federation, we're stranded refugees with limited resources. Baltar countered. If things go wrong with the Dominion, we're on a planet with infrastructure and the ability to produce what we need. Militarily, the Dominion option gives us better long-term survival prospects. Unless the Dominion decides we're more useful as Jem'Hadar 2.0. Kane replied coldly. Genetically engineered colonial soldiers bred for absolute loyalty. We have the military traditions, the combat experience, the physiological durability. If I were the founders and I wanted to create a new warrior species, humans with our specific skill set would be an excellent starting point. The Vorta representative's smile never wavered. Admiral, the Dominion would never force genetic modification on an unwilling population. We respect individual choice. Like the Vorta respect individual choice? Odo asked quietly. Tell me, what happens to a Vorta who refuses to worship the founders? Such a situation doesn't arise. The Vorta are fulfilled by service. Because you were genetically engineered to be fulfilled by service. The founders eliminated your capacity to choose otherwise and call it kindness. The Vorta's smile finally cracked. This debate is becoming circular. The Dominion's offer stands. Accept or refuse, but stop insulting our civilization with baseless accusations. Roslin stood, bringing the gavel down. Enough. Representatives, we vote in 1 hour. Use that time to consult your consciences, your constituents, and whatever gods you still believe in. This decision will define colonial civilization for generations, assuming we have generations. She paused, looking at the young pilot still holding her daughter. Lieutenant Thrace, thank you for your honesty. It's a useful reminder of what's actually at stake. During the recess, Sisko found Adama standing alone near an observation port, staring at Galactica hanging in the distance. Commander. Captain? Adama didn't turn. You know what I realized? This isn't really a choice between the Federation and the Dominion. It's a choice between dying free and living controlled. And I'm not sure which option my people should choose. Your people should choose to live, Sisko said. That's not surrender, that's survival. The question is what kind of life they're choosing. The Dominion life looks pretty good from here. Safety, resources, stability. Everything we've lost. Adama's jaw tightened. But I keep thinking about something the Cylons said during the war. They claimed they were liberating us from the burden of choice, from the suffering that comes with freedom. They genuinely believed enslaving us was merciful. The founders sound remarkably similar. They do. Sisko agreed. But Adama, whatever the Quorum decides, you need to know, the Federation won't abandon you. Even if you choose the Dominion, even if that choice helps them win the war, we'll remember that you were desperate and displaced and making the best decision you could with limited information. That won't make us enemies. It should, Adama said bitterly. If I were you, I'd see the Colonial Fleet as a threat to be neutralized. We have military capabilities that could tip the balance of your war. Letting us choose our own alliance is strategically insane. Probably. But the Federation was founded on the principle that strategic advantage doesn't justify denying people their freedom to choose. If we violate that principle to win the war, then we've already lost what we're fighting for. Adama finally turned to look at him. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise I'm just another tyrant claiming my tyranny is justified. The hour passed. The quorum reconvened. Representatives took their seats, faces showing the weight of impossible choices. Roslin stood at the podium, holding a data pad with the voting results. The quorum of the 12 colonies has voted, she announced, her voice steady despite the tremor Sisko could see in her hands. By a margin of 6-5, with representatives from Caprica, Gembinon, Tauron, Sagittaron, Scorpia, and Leonis voting in favor. We accept the Dominion's offer of settlement on Orasan and entry into preliminary alliance negotiations. The chamber erupted. Zarek and the other dissenting representatives shouted protests. Civilian observers cheered or wept depending on their positions. Military officers looked grimly resigned or cautiously hopeful. Sisko felt something cold settle in his chest. 50,000 people, delivered to the Founders. 50,000 potential hostages, potential soldiers, potential weapons in a war that consumed everything it touched. Odo's expression was unreadable, but his voice was quiet. "It's done, then." "Not quite," Adama said. He'd moved to stand beside Roslin, and his presence brought silence. "Madam President, as Commander of Galactica and ranking military officer of the Colonial Fleet, I need to state something for the record. I oppose this decision. I believe we're making a catastrophic mistake driven by desperation. And I formally request that Galactica be excluded from the Dominion Alliance negotiations." The chamber went silent. "Commander?" Roslin's voice was carefully neutral. "Galactica is a warship, not a civilian vessel. Our mission is colonial defense. If the civilian fleet chooses to settle under Dominion protection, that's their right. But I won't place this Battlestar under Founder command, won't integrate our military capabilities into Dominion strategic planning, and won't allow our combat expertise to be used in a war against the Federation. Galactica remains independent, defending colonial civilians where necessary, but maintaining sovereign operational authority." "You're splitting the fleet," Bagot said, horrified. "I'm maintaining military independence while respecting civilian governance. The Quorum voted for settlement rights and protection. They didn't vote to surrender the colonial military to foreign command." Roslin looked at Adama for a long moment. "This could cause a constitutional crisis." "I know. But Madam President, someone needs to maintain the capacity for independent action if things go wrong. Let the civilian fleet accept Dominion help. Let them settle on Orasan, build homes, give children like Lieutenant Thrace's daughter the lives they deserve. But leave Galactica out here, in space, ready to defend them if needed. The Dominion may not accept that condition," the Vorta representative said carefully. "Then they don't actually respect colonial sovereignty, do they?" Adama turned to face the diplomatic section. "If the Founders genuinely want to help refugees, they shouldn't need military control to do it. They can protect the civilian settlements, provide resources, offer everything they promised. Galactica's independence doesn't threaten any of that, unless the real goal is military integration rather than humanitarian assistance." The Vorta's smile returned, but it was colder now. "I will convey Commander Adama's position to the Founder. She will be interested in this development." As the session dissolved into chaos, representatives arguing about constitutional authority, military officers debating chain of command, civilians demanding clarification, Sisko found himself next to Odo near the exit. "Well," the changeling said quietly, "that was unexpected." "Adama just saved them," Sisko replied. "He may have just saved all of them, and they don't even realize it yet. Or he's created a split that the Founders will exploit to destroy both factions. That too. But Odo? For the first time since they arrived, I have hope. Why? Because Adama just proved that even desperate people can choose to preserve their capacity for freedom. That's worth fighting for." Outside the observation port, the wormhole pulsed with its alien light. On the other side, a Founder was receiving news of a complication, a deviation from expected behavior, a sign that these refugees might be more resilient than anticipated. And somewhere in deep space, Galactica's engines hummed with the promise of continued independence, a Battlestar that refused to surrender even when surrender looked like salvation. 3 days after the Quorum vote, the Colonial civilian fleet began preparations for departure to Orasan. 37 ships, transports, cargo haulers, passenger liners converted into makeshift habitats, formed up near the wormhole under Dominion escort. Galactica hung 5,000 kilometers distant, weapons cold but systems active, watching. Sisko stood in Deep Space Nine's ops, monitoring the situation with growing unease. The Dominion had been remarkably accommodating about Adama's declaration of military independence, too accommodating. Eileen had simply smiled when informed, saying, "The Founders respect strength. Commander Adama demonstrates admirable conviction. Galactica may maintain its sovereignty while we assist the civilian population." "I don't like it," Kira said from Tactical. "The Founders never accept defiance this easily. They're planning something." "Of course they are," Odo agreed. "The question is what? They could forcibly take Galactica. A few Jem'Hadar battleships would overwhelm colonial defenses. But they're choosing not to." "Why?" Dax looked up from her science station, her expression troubled. "Benjamin, I'm detecting unusual subspace fluctuations near the wormhole. Similar to what we registered when Galactica first arrived, but more controlled. Someone's manipulating dimensional barriers." Before Sisko could respond, alarms shrieked across ops. The view screen showed the wormhole opening, but not in its usual stable configuration. The vortex was wrong, flickering, unstable, throwing off energy signatures that made Federation sensors scream warnings. And through the distortion came ships. Not Dominion vessels. Not Federation. These were angular, aggressive designs built around weapon emplacements and armored hulls. Their configuration was eerily familiar. Sisko had seen similar principles in Galactica's construction, but these ships were larger, sleeker, more advanced. Cylon base ships. O'Brien breathed, his face pale. "Bloody hell, those are Cylon base ships." 3 massive vessels emerged from the impossible wormhole, each one larger than a Galaxy-class starship. Their hulls reflected light in strange ways, suggesting materials and construction techniques beyond standard metallurgy. Launch tubes opened along their flanks, releasing hundreds of smaller craft, raiders, based on Galactica's intelligence reports, but these ones moved with predatory grace that suggested sophisticated AI control. "Red alert!" Sisko snapped. "All hands to battle stations. O'Brien, hail Galactica." "They're already moving," Kira interrupted. "Galactica's launching Vipers and going to combat speed. They're not waiting for orders." On Galactica's CIC, chaos erupted with military precision. Commander Adama stood at the tactical display, watching 3 Cylon base ships materialize exactly where his people had been preparing to settle into false security. "How?" Colonel Tide demanded. "How did they follow us?" "The dimensional shift should have been impossible to track. Someone led them here," Adama said coldly. He turned to communications. "Get me the Founder. Now." The view screen showed Eileen aboard her vessel, and for the first time, her composure cracked. Not into panic, into something worse. Satisfaction. "Commander Adama? I see your old enemies have found you. You brought them here. You manipulated the wormhole to create a dimensional bridge." "I provided the Cylons with data on unusual dimensional anomalies," Eileen corrected. "What they chose to do with that information was their decision. The Founders merely observed that your species has unfinished business with synthetic intelligence. We thought it educational to see how both sides had evolved." Adama's hands clenched on the railing. "You're using us. Using the Cylons. This was never about helping refugees. You wanted to study synthetic warfare. We wanted to understand both organic and synthetic approaches to conflict," Eileen agreed. "The Cylons represent a fascinating evolutionary path, biological forms abandoned in favor of mechanical efficiency, yet retaining something resembling consciousness. And you Colonials have developed remarkable counter-tactics against them. Watching you fight will provide valuable data for the Dominion's long-term security planning." "The civilian ships?" Tai said urgently. "Sir, the transports are sitting targets." Adama made his decision in heartbeats. "All Vipers, defensive screen around the civilian fleet. Galactica, flank speed, put us between the base ships and Colonial 1. And get me Captain Sisko." The transmission connected instantly. Sisko's face appeared on the screen, Deep Space Nine's ops visible behind him. "Commander, we're reading 3 hostile vessels. Do they match your Cylon profiles?" "Exactly. Captain, the Founder engineered this. She brought the Cylons here deliberately. We're detecting the same thing, Sisko confirmed. The dimensional manipulation required tremendous energy and sophisticated understanding of parallel universe mechanics. The Dominion wanted this confrontation. He paused. Commander, Galactica can't take 3 base ships alone. Let us help. Why would you? Adama's voice was hard. My civilian fleet just voted to ally with your enemy. Tactically, you should let the Cylons destroy us and eliminate a Dominion asset. Commander, we don't. I know. You don't sacrifice people for tactical advantage. Something in Adama's expression shifted. Captain, I misjudged you. The Federation, Starfleet, everything you represent. I was so focused on seeing deception that I couldn't recognize genuine principle when it stood in front of me. I apologize for that. Apology accepted. Now let's keep your people alive long enough for you to reconsider that Dominion alliance. The first Cylon raiders reached engagement range. Galactica's point defense guns opened fire, filling space with kinetic rounds that tore through the smaller craft with brutal efficiency. Vipers from the launch bays accelerated into combat patterns, their pilots demonstrating years of experience fighting this exact enemy. But the base ships were learning. Their raiders adapted mid-flight, changing attack vectors, coordinating with precision that suggested networked intelligence. For every raider destroyed, 2 more adjusted tactics to avoid similar deaths. They're different, Ty observed, watching the tactical display. More advanced than the Cylons we fought 3 years ago. They've evolved. Of course they have, Adama replied grimly. They're machines. They learn, adapt, upgrade. That's what makes them so dangerous. He turned to weapons. Target the lead base ship, all forward batteries. Let's see if their hulls can handle sustained bombardment. Galactica's main guns spoke, massive kinetic impactors designed to crack planetary fortifications. The rounds crossed the distance in seconds, slamming into the lead base ship's hull. Armor shattered, atmosphere vented, but the vessel kept coming. Return fire lanced out, not kinetic rounds but some kind of energy weapons, adapted from technology the Cylons must have encountered in their own travels. The shots hit Galactica's armor, and alarms screamed. Damage control teams scrambled as hull breaches opened on decks 7 and 12. Shields would be really useful right now, Ty muttered. We'll make do with what we have, Adama replied. Helm, evasive pattern Delta. Weapons, concentrate fire on damaged sections of that base ship. Let's open them up. The Defiant dropped out of warp 300 kilometers from the battle, its compact form bristling with weapons. Sisko's voice came through on open channel. Galactica, this is Defiant. We're engaging the second base ship. Coordinate your fire with ours. Acknowledged, Adama replied. He watched the Defiant accelerate. Impossible speed, impossible maneuverability for a ship that size. Then its weapons spoke. Quantum torpedoes and phaser arrays lashed out, tearing into the second base ship's hull with energies that made Galactica's kinetic weapons look primitive by comparison. But the Cylons adapted fast, their hulls absorbing and redistributing energy in ways that suggested they'd encountered similar weapons before. They're learning from every hit, Dax reported from Defiant's science station. Adjusting their hull composition in real time, some kind of programmable matter technology. Benjamin, they're more advanced than anything in our databases. Then we hit them harder, Sisko replied. Worf, full spread, pattern Omega. Let's see them adapt to saturation bombardment. The Defiant's quantum torpedo launchers spoke in rapid sequence, filling space with destructive energy. The second base ship staggered under the assault, massive sections of its hull disintegrating. But the other 2 base ships adapted, their armor reconfiguring to better resist quantum torpedo detonations. And then the Cylons revealed their real weapon. The third base ship opened ports along its central axis. Golden light built in those openings, not weapons fire, but something else. Something that made every sensor on every ship in the area screen warnings about impossible energy buildups. Nuclear launch! O'Brien shouted from Deep Space Nine. Multiple warheads, fusion-enhanced, yields in the 100-megaton range. Impact in 40 seconds. Interceptors away! Adama commanded. Galactica's defensive batteries opened up, filling space with explosive rounds designed to detonate incoming missiles. Vipers broke from their attack runs, racing to intercept nuclear warheads with their own weapons. But there were too many. 12 warheads, spreading out to hit the civilian fleet, Galactica, and Deep Space Nine simultaneously. Deflectors at maximum, Worf reported from the Defiant. We can intercept 3, maybe 4 warheads. The rest will get through. Sisko's mind raced through options. They couldn't save everyone. But they could save some. Target the warheads heading for the civilian ships. Let our shields take the hits meant for us. Benjamin, at those yields. Dax started. Do it! The Defiant's phasers lanced out with surgical precision, detonating nuclear warheads at safe distance from the civilian transports. Brilliant light filled space as fusion reactions bloomed and died in the vacuum. 3 warheads eliminated. 4. 5. But 7 remained, and impact was seconds away. Then space twisted. A Romulan warbird decloaked directly in the path of 2 warheads. Its disruptors fired at point-blank range, destroying both missiles but catching itself in the nuclear detonations. The warbird's shields held, barely, as it tumbled through the blast zone. Romulans? Kira said in disbelief. What are they doing here? Apparently saving our lives, Sisko replied. All ships, concentrate fire on remaining warheads. Galactica's defensive batteries fired continuously. Vipers conducted kamikaze runs, their pilots launching missiles at maximum range before breaking off. The Defiant's phasers swept through space like scythes. 4 warheads destroyed. 5. 6. The 7th detonated 300 meters from Colonial 1. The massive civilian liner's hull buckled under the thermal pulse. Atmosphere vented from dozens of breaches. Emergency bulkhead slammed shut, but casualty reports were already flooding in. Colonial 1 is heavily damaged, Ty reported. Hull integrity at 40%. Life support failing on decks 3 through 7. Casualties in the hundreds. President Roslin's voice came through, strained but controlled. Galactica, this is Roslin. We're evacuating to emergency pods. Recommend all civilian vessels scatter. We can't withstand another volley. Negative, Adama replied. You scatter, you die separately. Stay in formation, use Galactica as a shield. We'll take the hits. Commander, you can't protect all of us. Watch me. The Romulan warbird repositioned, its commander's face appearing on general broadcast. A severe woman with the calculating eyes of someone used to making ruthless decisions. Colonial vessels, this is Commander Tomalak of the Romulan Star Empire. We're here under complicated circumstances. Suggest you accept Starfleet's asylum offer before the Founders decide you're more useful dead than alive. Why would the Romulans help us? Adama demanded. Because the Dominion playing games with dimensional mechanics near the neutral zone threatens Romulan security. Tomalak replied. And because we're curious about ships that can destroy Jem'Hadar vessels so efficiently. Consider this an investment in mutual interests. The Cylon base ships regrouped, analyzing the new tactical situation. Then, as one, they changed targets. Away from the Colonial ships, away from the Defiant, toward Deep Space Nine itself. They're going for the station, O'Brien said, his voice tight. They must know about the wormhole. Figure destroying it will strand them but also prevent Dominion reinforcements. The base ships accelerated, their weapons systems charging. Raiders formed screens around them, thousands of synthetic fighters creating a mobile defense network. They were magnificent in their terrible efficiency, no wasted movement, no hesitation, pure calculated destruction. All ships, Sisko broadcast. Defend Deep Space Nine. If that wormhole falls, we lose our strategic advantage in this entire sector. Galactica turned, its massive hull ponderous but determined. The Defiant raced ahead, weapons blazing. The Romulan warbird moved to flank, its disruptors adding to the firepower. And the Colonial Vipers, those small fighters piloted by humans who'd spent years fighting synthetic enemies, dove into the radar screen with a ferocity that made Sisko's breath catch. He watched Lieutenant Kara Thrace's fighter. He recognized her call sign from Galactica's tactical data, execute a maneuver that should have been impossible. She used the destroyed radar's debris as a shield, accelerated through the explosion, and emerged directly behind a base ship's weapon port. Her missiles fired at point-blank range, penetrating deep into the Cylon vessel's interior before detonating. The base ship shuddered. Its weapon systems went dark. Secondary explosions rippled through its hull. "One down," Adama said quietly. "Two to go." But the remaining base ships had reached Deep Space Nine. Their weapons opened fire, hammering the station's shields with energies that made the Dominion's best attacks look gentle. The station's defensive systems returned fire, but Cardassian-built phasers weren't designed for capital ship engagement. "Shields at 60%, Kira reported. 40. 20. "Benjamin, we can't take much more of this." The Cylon raiders began targeting the station's docking pylons, attempting to cripple its ability to support ships. One pylon exploded, spinning off into space. Another took critical damage. And then the wormhole opened. Not the stable, controlled opening that marked normal Dominion traffic. This was violent, forced, the dimensional barriers being torn rather than traversed. Energy cascaded out in waves that disrupted every sensor in the area. Through the chaos came a Jem'Hadar battle group. 20 ships, fully armed, with Dominion battlecruisers at the center. Eileen's voice came through on all frequencies. "Silence! Your presence here violates Dominion territorial sovereignty. You have 30 seconds to withdraw through dimensional channels or be destroyed." The Cylons responded by targeting the Dominion vessels. "They're insane," Ty said. "They can't fight the Dominion fleet and us simultaneously." "They're machines," Adama replied. "They're calculating odds, running scenarios. They think they can win." The battle that followed was unlike anything Sisko had witnessed. The Cylons' advanced technology clashed with the Dominion's numerical superiority and tactical ruthlessness. Jem'Hadar attack ships swarmed the base ships, accepting catastrophic losses to deliver weapons at close range. Dominion Polaron beams tore through Cylon hulls that had adapted to Federation phasers but hadn't encountered Dominion weapons before. And caught in the middle were the Colonials, the Federation, and one very confused Romulan commander. "Sir," Dax called out, "we need to make a decision. Do we help the Dominion destroy the Cylons, or do we use this chaos to evacuate the Colonial civilians?" Sisko looked at the tactical display. The Dominion could probably destroy the Cylons without Federation help, but the cost would be enormous, and the Founders would expect Colonial gratitude afterward. Or they could pull back, protect the refugees, and let two enemies destroy each other. "Adama," Sisko transmitted, "your call. We're here to help your people, not fight your war for you. What do you need?" There was a long pause. Then Adama's voice came through, heavy with a decision that would define everything that followed. "Captain Sisko, I was wrong. Not about the Dominion, they're exactly as dangerous as I thought. But about the Federation. You came to help us knowing we'd allied with your enemy. You risked your ship and crew for refugees who owed you nothing. That's not something I've seen in a long time. Commander. Galactica requests formal asylum with the United Federation of Planets. For the entire Colonial Fleet, military and civilian. We'll accept your bureaucratic processes, your prime directive, all of it. Because I'd rather die free in your universe than live controlled in anyone else's." On the viewscreen, Sisko saw Eileen's expression shift. For the first time, the Founder looked genuinely angry. "Accepted," Sisko said. "All Colonial vessels, form up on Deep Space Nine. We're getting you out of here." The evacuation began amid the chaos of three-way combat. Galactica's Vipers provided cover while civilian transports limped toward the station. The Defiant held position, its shields extended to protect the most damaged vessels. The Romulan warbird, apparently deciding this situation was more interesting alive than dead, added its firepower to the defensive screen. The Cylons attempted to pursue, but the Dominion forces cut them off. Eileen might have lost her prize, but she clearly wasn't going to let synthetic enemies operate in her territory unchallenged. As the last colonial transport reached Deep Space Nine's protective range, Sisko watched the Cylon base ships begin their retreat. They'd learned what they came to learn: dimensional traversal technology, Dominion capabilities, colonial tactics updated for this universe. They'd be back, eventually, with that knowledge integrated into their synthetic evolution. But for now, 50,000 colonial refugees were under Federation protection. A battlestar that could stand against Dominion vessels was no longer an enemy asset. And the Founders had just learned that even desperate people could refuse their offers when shown genuine alternatives. "Chief," Sisko said quietly, "start processing asylum requests. Looks like we just inherited a fleet." The ward room on Deep Space Nine had never been designed for this many people. Representatives from three governments, Federation, Colonial, and Romulan, crowded around the central table, with military advisors, scientific personnel, and diplomatic staff filling every available space. The air recyclers struggled to keep up with the increased demand, giving the entire room a slightly stale quality that matched the exhausted faces of everyone present. Commander Adama sat across from Captain Sisko, with President Romulan to his right. Her left arm was in a medical regenerator from injuries sustained during Colonial One's near destruction. Vice President Baltar occupied the corner, his nervous energy barely contained as he reviewed casualty reports on a data pad. Tom Zarek stood near the wall, arms crossed, watching everything with the suspicious intensity of someone who'd learned not to trust authority. Commander Tomalak represented the Romulan Star Empire, his severe features arranged in an expression of calculated interest. Beside him sat a Tal Shiar operative who'd been introduced simply as Observer Velo, a designation that fooled no one. Odo stood near Sisko, having insisted on being present despite colonial discomfort with shapeshifters. After watching him fight against his own people during the battle, Adama had grudgingly agreed. "Status report," Sisko began, bringing the chaotic assembly to order. "Chief?" O'Brien pulled up holographic displays showing the damage assessment. "Colonial 1 is salvageable, but it'll take 3 weeks minimum in one of our repair facilities. 7 other civilian vessels sustained critical damage. We're transferring their populations to temporary quarters on DS9 and the habitat ring we're jury-rigging in Upper Pylon 4. Galactica took heavy hits, but the Battlestar's still combat-capable. Casualties across the Colonial Fleet, 473 dead, over 1,000 wounded. We've got Federation medical teams working around the clock, but our facilities weren't designed for this scale of trauma care." The numbers hit hard. Roslyn's face went pale, and several quorum members bowed their heads. For a population of barely 50,000, losing nearly 500 people in a single engagement was catastrophic. The Dominion suffered heavier losses. Dax added, pulling up tactical analysis. 12 Jem'Hadar attack ships destroyed, 3 battlecruisers heavily damaged. The Cylons lost 1 base ship completely and inflicted significant damage on the other Dominion forces before retreating through the dimensional rift they'd used to arrive. The Founders will not be pleased. Good, Adama said flatly. Let them be displeased. They orchestrated this entire situation, brought the Cylons here deliberately to study us like laboratory specimens. 473 of my people died because the Founders wanted data on synthetic warfare. Indeed. Tomalak interjected smoothly. Which brings us to the rather interesting question of why the Romulan Star Empire just spent considerable resources defending Federation interests against both Dominion and Cylon forces. I believe Captain Sisko and I need to have a frank discussion about compensation. Sisko met the Romulan commander's gaze. You intervened without being asked, Commander. That was your choice. We intervened because the Dominion manipulating dimensional barriers near the neutral zone represents a direct threat to Romulan security. Your colonial friends here, he gestured at Adama, have combat capabilities that destroyed 3 Jem'Hadar vessels in under a minute during their first encounter. That's technology and tactical doctrine the Empire finds very interesting. We're not selling our military secrets, Adama said coldly. I'm not asking you to sell them. I'm suggesting a mutual exchange of information. The Romulan Empire has resources, shipyards, cloaking technology that could revolutionize colonial defensive capabilities. In exchange, we'd appreciate understanding how your kinetic weapons penetrate Dominion shields so efficiently, and perhaps access to those remarkable small fighters of yours for analysis. Absolutely not. Roslin interjected. Commander Tomalak, the Colonial Fleet has just requested Federation asylum. We're not going to immediately turn around and start weapons trading with your government. Why not? The Federation and Romulan Empire have a non-aggression pact. Technology exchange between allied powers is standard practice. We're not allied, Sisko corrected. We have a temporary ceasefire motivated by mutual Dominion opposition. There's a significant difference. Tomalak smiled thinly. Semantics, Captain? But very well. If the Colonials prefer to place all their trust in Federation generosity, that's their choice. I simply thought I'd offer alternatives before you discover that Starfleet's bureaucracy moves at approximately the speed of continental drift. Balta leaned forward. Commander Tomalak raises a valid point, actually. Captain Sisko, what exactly does Federation asylum entail? We've accepted your offer, but the specific terms remain vague. Settlement rights, resource allocation, military integration. These details matter. Agreed, Sisko replied. Which is why I've contacted Starfleet Command and the Federation Council. They're sending a diplomatic envoy to negotiate formal asylum terms. Expected arrival is 72 hours. 72 hours during which we're stranded on a damaged space station in hostile territory. Zarek observed. The Dominion knows we rejected their offer. The Cylons know where we are and how to reach us. We're sitting targets. Which is why Galactica will maintain combat readiness, Adama said. And why I'm requesting permission to station Viper patrols around Deep Space Nine's perimeter. Captain Sisko, with respect, your station's defenses are adequate against conventional threats but insufficient against concentrated Cylon assault. Our fighters can provide early warning and intercept capability. Kira bristled. Commander, this is a Bajoran station. We don't need colonial military forces dictating our security posture. Major, I'm not dictating anything. I'm offering assistance from people who've spent years fighting the exact enemy that just attacked us. Your defensive systems are impressive by local standards, but they're not designed for what the Cylons can do. He's right, Odo said quietly. Everyone turned to look at the changeling. The Cylons demonstrated adaptive capabilities that exceed anything in Federation databases. They learned from every attack, modified their tactics in real time, and employed weapon systems we've never encountered. If they return, and they will return, we'll need every advantage we can get. Colonial experience fighting synthetic enemies is tactically valuable. Roslin studied Odo with the same analytical intensity she'd applied during their first meeting. Constable, during the battle, you fought against your own people. The Founders. Why? Because they're wrong. Odo replied simply. They believe order justifies any method, that control equals peace, that solids need Founder guidance to avoid self-destruction. I've lived among solids long enough to know that's false. Messy, chaotic, often frustrating, but preferable to perfect tyranny. Even when that chaos gets people killed? Roslin gestured at the casualty reports. 473 deaths that might have been prevented if we'd accepted Dominion protection. Or 473 deaths that were caused because the Dominion engineered a confrontation to manipulate you. Sisko countered. President Roslin, the founders didn't bring the Cylons here by accident. They calculated that watching you fight your old enemy would either demonstrate your value as military assets or eliminate a complication. Either outcome served their interests. Which is precisely the kind of ruthless pragmatism that wins wars. Baltar muttered. The Federation fights with principles and loses ground. The Dominion fights with calculated brutality and expands territory. Maybe we chose wrong after all. Did we? Adama turned to face his vice president. Baltar, during the battle, when Colonial 1 was taking nuclear fire and our shields were failing, who came to our aid? Not the Dominion. They were too busy fighting Cylons. The Federation. Starfleet risked their ship to intercept warheads heading for our civilians. That's not pragmatism. That's principle in action, and it saved lives. It saved some lives, Zarek corrected. Not all of them. Not the 473 who died because we're caught in a war that isn't ours, fighting enemies from two different universes while political entities debate our fate like we're chess pieces. The room fell silent. Zarek's words carried the frustration of a population that had endured too much, lost too much, and now found themselves dependent on the goodwill of strangers. Roslin broke the silence. Captain Sisko. Commander Tomalak. I appreciate your government's assistance, genuine or calculated. But the colonial people need clarity. We need to know what asylum actually means, where we'll live, how we'll survive, what our status will be in this universe. We can't exist indefinitely on a damaged space station waiting for bureaucratic processes to run their course. Agreed, Sisko said. Which is why I'm proposing a temporary solution while formal negotiations proceed. There's a planet in Federation space. New Bajorans, established as a colony world for Bajoran settlers displaced by the Cardassian occupation. The colony has struggled with limited population and resources. I'm proposing the Colonial Fleet relocate there temporarily, with colonial civilians integrating into the existing settlement, while maintaining their own governance structure. Integrating with another displaced population. Roslin said thoughtfully. That's, actually inspired. Shared trauma, shared understanding of what it means to rebuild after destruction. It's also politically clever, Tomalak observed. Put the Colonials on a Bajoran world, and they become Bayer's problem as much as the Federation's. If things go wrong, Starfleet has plausible deniability. Or, Kira said sharply, it's a genuine attempt to help refugees by connecting them with people who understand their situation. Not everything is a political calculation, Commander. In my experience, Major, everything is. Adama studied the data on New Bajorans that Dax had pulled up. Population? Approximately 15,000 Bajorans, Dax replied. The colony was established 6 years ago but has struggled with agricultural challenges and limited industrial infrastructure. Adding 50,000 colonials would triple the population and strain existing resources, but it would also provide labor, expertise, and, if I'm reading Galactica's technical specifications correctly, significant military defense capability. The Bajorans might not want military defense, O'Brien pointed out. Many of them settled on New Bajoran specifically to escape the occupation's militarization of their homeworld. Then we'll ask them, Sisko said. I'll contact First Minister Shakar on Bajorans and the Colonial Governor on New Bajorans. This needs to be voluntary on both sides. Colonial choice to settle there, Bajoran choice to accept them. And if the Bajorans refuse? Baltar asked. Then we find another solution. There are other Federation worlds that might accept colonial settlement, though none with the same cultural resonance. A proximity alert sounded. Worf's voice came through on intercom. Captain, sensors are detecting a vessel approaching from the Gamma Quadrant. Dominion configuration, but different. It's broadcasting a diplomatic signal. Everyone tensed. Adama's hand moved instinctively toward a sidearm he wasn't wearing. Odo's expression went completely neutral, his changeling equivalent of combat readiness. On screen, Sisko ordered. The view screen in the wardroom activated, showing a Vorta standing on an unfamiliar bridge configuration. Not Eris, not the female who'd accompanied Eileen. This one was male, younger, with an expression that seemed almost apologetic. Captain Sisko, President Roslin, honored representatives. I am Kivan, Vorta diplomatic attaché assigned to unusual circumstances. I come bearing a message from the Founders regarding the recent unfortunate events. Unfortunate events, Adama repeated dangerously. Is that what you're calling the deliberate manipulation of dimensional barriers to bring our worst enemies to this universe? Kivan's smile never wavered, but something in his eyes suggested genuine discomfort. Commander Adama, the Founders acknowledged that Founder Eileen's experimental approach to colonial integration was overly aggressive. The dimensional manipulation was conducted without full Founder consensus, and the resulting confrontation exceeded expected parameters. The Dominion wishes to express regret for colonial casualties. Regret, Roslin said flatly. Not apology. Not compensation. Regret. The Founders don't apologize, President Roslin. It's not in their nature. But they do recognize when tactical approaches fail to achieve desired outcomes. Bringing the Cylons here was meant to demonstrate that the Dominion could protect the Colonials from threats the Federation cannot address. Instead, it demonstrated that the Federation, he glanced at Sisko, will defend even those who've allied with Dominion interests. This was unexpected. What's your point? Sisko asked. My point, Captain, is that the Founders are recalibrating their approach to colonial integration. The offer of settlement on Orasan stands, but with modified terms acknowledging colonial military sovereignty. Commander Adama would maintain operational control of Galactica and the Colonial Fleet's defensive forces, while civilians receive Dominion resources and protection. A compromise between security and independence. You brought our enemy here, Adama said, his voice cold. You killed nearly 500 of my people as part of an experiment. And now you're offering a compromise as if that makes it acceptable? I'm offering an alternative to Federation bureaucracy that will take months to process your asylum requests while your people languish in temporary accommodations. Kivan's tone remained pleasant, but his words cut deep. The Federation means well, Commander. But they're slow, constrained by regulations and committees and principles that prioritize process over results. The Dominion can have your civilians settled, protected, and rebuilding their lives within 2 weeks. The choice remains yours. Roslin looked at Adama, then at Sisko. Captain, I need honesty. How long will Federation asylum processing actually take? Sisko wanted to lie, to promise quick resolution. But Roslin had asked for honesty. Standard procedure for refugee settlement is 3 to 6 months. Emergency provisions might accelerate that to 6 weeks minimum, but even that requires council approval, planetary government consent, resource allocation negotiations. 6 weeks, Roslin repeated. 6 weeks of my people living on a damaged station or in temporary habitats, while the Dominion is offering permanent settlement in 2. Permanent servitude in 2 weeks, Odo corrected. President Roslin, I know what the Founders are doing. They're using your desperation, your people's suffering, to make subjugation look like salvation. Don't fall for it. Easy for you to say, Constable. You're not responsible for 50,000 lives. Neither are the Founders, Odo replied. They're responsible only to their own interests. Everything else is calculation. Kivan's smile finally cracked slightly. Constable Odo, your dedication to undermining your own people is remarkable. One might almost call it treasonous. One might, Odo agreed. If I consider the Dominion's actions worthy of loyalty. I don't. The Vorta turned his attention back to Roslin. President Roslin, I'll leave the offer open for 24 hours. After that, the Founders will consider colonial intentions clarified and adjust Dominion strategy accordingly. Please consider carefully. Your people deserve better than indefinite refugee status in someone else's war. The transmission ended. The wardroom erupted in argument. Quorum members debated whether to reconsider, whether the Dominion's modified offer addressed their concerns, whether 6 weeks of uncertainty was acceptable. Baltar advocated for at least exploring Dominion terms. Zarek argued they'd already rejected one offer and reversing course showed weakness. Adama slammed his hand on the table, bringing silence. This debate is pointless. The Dominion killed our people. Deliberately brought the Cylons here, watched them attack us, and now they're offering modified terms as if that absolves them of responsibility. We accepted Federation asylum. That decision stands. Even if it means 6 weeks of suffering? Baltar demanded. Even if it means 6 months. We've survived worse. We'll survive this. Roslyn was quiet for a long moment, studying Adama's face. Then she turned to Sisko. Captain, I'm going to trust you. Trust that the Federation's principles aren't just rhetoric, that your offer of asylum is genuine, that 6 weeks of bureaucratic processing is the price of dealing with people who actually value freedom over efficiency. But I need you to understand, my people are at their breaking point. We can't wait 6 months. We need the Federation to prove that principles and speed aren't mutually exclusive. Sisko met her gaze. President Roslyn, I'll contact Starfleet Command directly. I'll invoke emergency protocols, call in every favor I have, and push for accelerated processing. I can't promise miracles, but I can promise effort. That's all I'm asking. As the meeting dissolved, with various factions breaking off to argue specifics and plan contingencies, Tamalak approached Sisko quietly. Captain, a word? They moved to a corner, away from the crowd. The Romulan commander's expression was unreadable. This is a mistake, Tamalak said quietly. The Colonials have military capabilities that could tip the balance of this war. You should be integrating them into Starfleet operations immediately, not wasting time with settlement negotiations and asylum bureaucracy. They're refugees, not weapons. They're both. And the Dominion knows it, which is why they're so persistent. If I were you, I'd be much more pragmatic about this situation. If you were me, Commander, we'd already be at war with half the quadrant. Sisko studied the Romulan. Why are you really here? What does the Star Empire want from this situation? Tamalak smiled. The same thing everyone wants, Captain. Advantage. The Dominion is expanding, the Federation is holding barely, and the introduction of colonial forces, not to mention synthetic enemies from parallel universes, has destabilized the entire strategic landscape. The Romulan Empire is simply observing, making note of who demonstrates competence, who maintains principles, who survives. And when you're done observing, then we'll decide which side offers the best long-term prospects for Romulan interests. Good luck with your bureaucracy, Captain. I suspect you'll need it. As Tamalak departed, Odo moved to stand beside Sisko. 18 hours into the 24-hour deadline, everything went wrong. It started with a single alert on Deep Space Nine's sensors, a spatial distortion near the wormhole, similar to but distinct from the dimensional tear the Cylons had used. Chief O'Brien was tracking it from ops, running analysis algorithms, when the distortion suddenly expanded and 3 vessels emerged. Not Dominion. Not Cylon. Not any configuration in Federation databases. Captain to ops, O'Brien transmitted urgently. We've got company, and it's not friendly. Sisko arrived within minutes, still fastening his uniform jacket from interrupted sleep. The view screen showed 3 ships that looked like they'd been designed by someone who understood violence on a fundamental level. Angular, brutal, covered in weapon emplacements and heavy armor, they resembled Galactica's design philosophy taken to its logical extreme. Colonial vessels? Kira asked from Tactical. No, Dax replied from Sciences, her voice tight. These are Cylon. But not the base ships we fought before. These are different. Older design philosophy, more mechanical, less organic integration. Benjamin, I think these are Centurions. The original Cylon models from before the humanoid infiltrators. Impossible. Adama's voice came through as he rushed into ops, having been awakened by the same alert. The Centurions were the first generation, Pure machines, no biological components, completely subservient to their programming. They haven't operated independently in decades. The humanoid models replaced them. Well, someone forgot to tell them that. O'Brien muttered. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. It's binary code, but there's something embedded in it. Dax, can you decode this? The Trill's fingers flew across her console. It's a message. Translated from machine language. Biological entities designation Colonial. Your dimensional displacement detected. Retrieval protocol initiated. Resistance is futile. You will be returned to conflict zone for processing. Processing. Adama repeated, his face going pale. That's Centurion terminology for dissection and analysis. They want to capture us, study how we survive the dimensional shift, and use that data to improve Cylon capabilities. The lead Centurion vessel moved with mechanical precision, positioning itself between the wormhole and the Colonial Fleet. The other two ships began deploying smaller craft, not raiders, but boarding pods. Dozens of them, each carrying what sensors indicated were armored Centurion units designed for ship-to-ship assault. They're going after Galactica, Worf reported. Targeting the Battlestar specifically, they must recognize it as the primary military asset. On Galactica's CIC, Colonel Tai was already coordinating defensive responses. All batteries, defensive fire. Launch Vipers, pattern Delta. Seal all airlocks and prepare for boarding action. Belay that, Adama commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. Don't launch fighters. Don't fire weapons. They want Galactica? Let them think they can take it. Sir? Tai stared at him. You're suggesting we let them board? I'm suggesting we use their predictability against them. Centurions are machines, they follow protocols, execute programmed responses. They'll expect resistance, defensive formations, standard military doctrine. So we give them something else. Adama turned to the communications officer. Get me Captain Sisko. And someone find me Lieutenant Thrace. I need the best Viper pilot we have for a mission she's definitely going to hate. 10 minutes later, the plan was in motion. Galactica appeared to stand down, weapons going cold, Viper bays remaining sealed. To the Centurions, it looked like surrender, a calculated decision by organic commanders who'd assessed the tactical situation and chosen survival over futile resistance. The boarding pods closed in, magnetic grapples securing to Galactica's hull. Cutting torches began burning through armor plating, creating breaches in carefully selected locations. Centurion units poured through. Mechanical warriors standing 2 meters tall, their chrome bodies bristling with integrated weapons and sensory equipment. They found empty corridors. Emergency bulkheads sealed. Life support disabled in entire sections. And then the trap sprung. From concealed positions throughout the ship, Colonial Marines opened fire with weapons specifically designed for Centurion combat. Armor-piercing rounds that targeted joint assemblies, electromagnetic pulse grenades that disrupted synthetic neural networks, explosive charges placed at structural weak points. Centurions were always stupid in close quarters, Adama explained to Sisko, who was monitoring the engagement from Deep Space Nine. They're excellent in open combat, superior targeting, no fear, perfect coordination. But they can't adapt to rapidly changing environments. They follow programmed assault patterns, which makes them predictable. We've been fighting them for years. We know how they think, or rather, how they don't think. On Galactica's Deck 12, Lieutenant Kara Thrace led a strike team through corridors filled with disabled Centurion units. Her mission wasn't defensive, it was offensive. She carried a specialized data spike designed by Baltar based on old Colonial intelligence protocols, intended to interface with Centurion command networks. Starbuck to CIC. She transmitted using her call sign. I've reached the primary boarding pod. Attempting interface now. The data spike punched into the pod's control systems. Baltar's code began executing, not a weapon, not a virus, but a simple query. A request for the Centurion's command ship location, tactical protocols, and most importantly, information about how they track the Colonial Fleet across dimensional barriers. "I'm in," Thrace reported. "Downloading data." "But sir, this is wrong. The Centurions aren't operating autonomously. They're receiving commands from somewhere else. Something's directing them, and it's not the humanoid Cylons we're familiar with." "Source?" Adama demanded. "Unknown. The signal is coming through subspace, but the encryption is beyond anything in our databases." "Wait." Static burst across the channel. "Sir, they know I'm here. They're adapting. Centurions are converging on my position." "Starbuck, abort. Pull back to." "Negative. I've almost got it. Just need 30 more seconds." The transmission cut off in a burst of weapons fire and mechanical screeching. "All teams, converge on Deck 12. Adama ordered. "Get our people out of there." But Thrace's gambit had worked. The data spike transmitted its payload before being destroyed, sending compressed intelligence files directly to Galactica's computers and, simultaneously, to Deep Space Nine's science stations. Dax pulled up the data, her expression growing progressively more disturbed as she analyzed it. "Benjamin, you need to see this. The Centurions aren't just retrieving the Colonials. They're conducting reconnaissance for something much larger." The holographic display showed star charts, tactical assessments, dimensional mathematics that made Federation physics look primitive by comparison. The Centurions had tracked the Colonial Fleet by analyzing the dimensional tier's residual signature, but they'd also detected something else: the wormhole. "They're interested in the Bajoran wormhole," Dax explained. "The Centurions have identified it as a stable passage between spatial regions, and their command network has flagged it as strategically valuable. Benjamin, if the Cylons gain access to the wormhole, they could use it to spread across the Alpha and Gamma quadrants. They'd have a dimensional bridge and a spatial bridge. They could operate in multiple universes simultaneously." "They're not getting it," Sisko said flatly. "Worf, target those Centurion vessels. Maximum firepower. I want them disabled before they can transmit what they've learned back to their command network." The Defiant, which had been holding position near the station, accelerated toward the Centurion ships. Quantum torpedoes blazed across space, slamming into mechanical hulls with devastating effect. But the Centurions weren't defenseless. Their weapons systems tracked the Defiant with machine precision, return fire lancing out in calculated patterns designed to overwhelm shields through sustained assault. "Shields holding at 70%, Worf reported. "But Captain, these vessels are heavily armored. Our torpedoes are causing damage, but not critical failures." On Galactica, the boarding action had devolved into brutal close-quarters combat. Colonial Marines fought with the desperation of people defending their last refuge, using every trick learned from years of Centurion warfare. They targeted sensory clusters, severed communication relays, used the ship's own structure as weapons. Sealed bulkheads crushing Centurion units, depressurized sections hurling them into space, electrical systems overloaded to create devastating electromagnetic pulses. Thrace emerged from the wreckage of the boarding pod, her armor scorched and her left arm hanging at an awkward angle. 3 Marines dragged her toward medical, but she was still clutching the data spike's backup unit. "Got it," she gasped into her communicator. "Commander, they're not alone. The Centurions are the vanguard for something called a Resurrection Hub, some kind of mobile command station that can manufacture new Cylon units and transfer consciousness between mechanical bodies. It's en route to this location. ETA, 6 hours. Adama felt ice settle in his chest. How big? Ship classification indicates dreadnought level. Bigger than the base ships we fought before, designed for sustained operations without resupply. Sir, if that thing gets here, it won't just destroy Galactica. It'll destroy everything, the station, the Colonial Fleet, probably the wormhole itself just to deny it to organic life. In Deep Space Nine's ops, the implications were immediately clear. Sisko looked at the tactical display showing 3 Centurion vessels currently engaged, with a massive command ship bearing down on their position. "We need to evacuate," Kira said. "Get the Colonial civilians out of here, collapse the wormhole if necessary to prevent Cylon access." "We can't collapse the wormhole," O'Brien interrupted. "It's maintained by the prophets, non-corporeal entities. We have no mechanism to destroy it." "Then we defend it," Sisko decided. "Contact Starfleet Command, request immediate reinforcements. Contact the Klingon High Command, remind them they still owe us for assistance during the Dominion's Cardassian offensive. And someone get me the Romulan commander." "Already here, Captain." Tomalak's voice came through on communication channels. His warbird decloaked 300 kilometers from the station. "I've been monitoring your situation with considerable interest. A Cylon Resurrection Hub would be a fascinating prize." Imagine the technological insights, the understanding of synthetic consciousness transfer, the weapons applications. This isn't about prizes, Commander. If that hub reaches the wormhole. I understand perfectly, Captain. Which is why the Romulan Star Empire is willing to offer assistance. We'll help you destroy the approaching Cylon forces, in exchange for complete access to all data recovered from those Centurion units, plus salvage rights to any destroyed Cylon technology. Sisko wanted to refuse on principle. But principle wouldn't stop a Dreadnought-class vessel from destroying everything he was trying to protect. Agreed. "But Tomalak, if you tried to take control of the wormhole during this engagement..." "Captain, please. I'm ruthlessly pragmatic, not suicidal. The Dominion would destroy the Romulan Empire before allowing us to control a passage to the Gamma Quadrant. I'm here for technology and leverage, not territorial conquest." The Romulan warbird moved into formation with the Defiant, its disruptors adding firepower to the assault on Centurion vessels. Galactica's main batteries finally opened up, having cleared boarding parties from critical sections. Kinetic rounds hammered mechanical hulls, punching through armor that had been designed to resist energy weapons but not sustained physical bombardment. One Centurion vessel broke apart, its structural integrity compromised. The second began a fighting retreat, attempting to transmit data about the wormhole back to its command network. "Don't let it send that signal," Sisko ordered. Worf fired a full spread of quantum torpedoes. The Centurion vessel's communication arrays exploded in brilliant flashes of light. But before it died, before the last of its systems failed, it managed to transmit a burst of compressed data through subspace. "Did they get through?" Sisko demanded. Dax checked her readings, her face grim. "Partial transmission. They sent coordinates and basic wormhole data before we cut them off. The Resurrection Hub knows where we are. And Benjamin, I'm detecting the hub's approach vector now. It's not 6 hours away anymore, they've increased speed. ETA, 90 minutes. 90 minutes to prepare for an enemy they couldn't fully understand, using weapons that might not be effective against mechanical intelligence advanced enough to transfer consciousness between bodies." Adama's voice came through on the command channel. "Captain Sisko, I'm proposing a coordinated defense. Galactica will take point position. We're designed for sustained bombardment, and we know Cylon weaknesses. Your Defiant provides mobile fire support with those quantum torpedoes. Commander Tomalak's warbird handles flanking attacks with cloaking capability. Deep Space Nine maintains position as our defensive anchor. And when the Resurrection Hub arrives with capabilities we can't predict?" Sisko asked. "Then we adapt, improvise, and survive. It's what we've been doing for 3 years, Captain. It's what the Federation's been doing during this war. And it's what we'll keep doing until either the Cylons are destroyed or we are." Roslin's voice joined the channel from Colonial 1. "Commander Adama, this isn't the Colonial Fleet's fight. We came here seeking refuge, not to drag the Federation into our war with synthetic intelligence. President Roslin, with respect, the Cylons made it everyone's fight the moment they identified the wormhole as strategically valuable. This isn't about colonial conflicts anymore, it's about preventing synthetic entities from gaining access to technologies and territories that could destabilize this entire region of space." Odo stepped forward in ops, his expression thoughtful. Captain, I have a question. These Cylons can transfer consciousness between mechanical bodies through some kind of network system. According to the data Lieutenant Thrace recovered, yes. Dax confirmed. Then they're vulnerable to exactly the kind of infiltration the Founders specialize in. Odo turned to face Sisko. We need to contact the Dominion. Tell them a synthetic intelligence force is approaching the wormhole with the capability to spread across the Gamma Quadrant. The Founders will not tolerate that threat. You want to invite the Dominion into this battle? Kira asked, horrified. I want to use one enemy to fight another, Odo replied. The Founders fear synthetic intelligence because it's immune to their primary control mechanisms. If they think the Cylons might access the Gamma Quadrant, they'll commit significant resources to destroy the threat. And then we're dealing with Dominion forces in our space. Sisko objected. We're already dealing with Cylon forces in our space, Romulan forces in our space, and desperate colonial refugees in our space. Adding one more threat to the tactical equation might actually improve our odds, or at least divide enemy attention long enough for us to survive. Sisko looked at the tactical display. 90 minutes before the Resurrection Hub arrived. A damaged battlestar, a single Starfleet warship, one Romulan vessel, and a space station designed for commerce rather than sustained combat. Against a Dreadnought-class Cylon command ship with unknown capabilities and the ability to manufacture reinforcements. The odds were terrible. But terrible odds had never stopped him before. O'Brien, send a coded message to the Dominion. Inform them of the Cylon threat and request immediate military assistance. Dax, start working on tactical scenarios. I want to know every possible weakness in a Resurrection Hub's design. Adama, coordinate your Viper squadrons with our runabout pilots. Small craft might be our best chance at penetrating any defensive screens. Tomalak, your cloaking device gives you first strike capability. Use it wisely. And if the Dominion doesn't respond in time? Kira asked. Sisko's expression hardened. Then we find out whether principles and desperation are enough to stop mechanical perfection. All hands to battle stations. In 90 minutes we defend everything that matters. The countdown began. Across Deep Space Nine, across Galactica, aboard the Defiant and the Romulan Warbird and every colonial vessel capable of mounting weapons, people prepared for a battle that would determine whether organic life maintained its foothold in this region of space, or whether synthetic intelligence would claim another universe for its own inexorable expansion. The Resurrection Hub emerged from subspace like a monument to synthetic evolution. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of a Galaxy-class starship, with a hull that seemed to shift and reconfigure itself continuously. Armor plates moved like living tissue, weapons emplacements rotated through configurations that suggested adaptive combat algorithms, and along its central axis, manufacturing bays glowed with the blue-white light of active production facilities. It wasn't just a warship. It was a factory, a command center, and a symbol of what the Cylons had become: intelligence without biological limitation, purpose without mortality, evolution driven by pure mathematical optimization. Gods! Colonel Tai breathed from Galactica's CIC. That thing could manufacture an entire fleet while fighting us. Then we don't give it time to manufacture anything, Adama replied. He stood at the tactical display, watching the hub's approach vector with the intensity of someone calculating impossible odds. All batteries, prepare for sustained bombardment. Target those manufacturing bays first. Every Centurion unit they don't build is one less enemy we face. On Deep Space Nine, Sisko coordinated the defensive formation. The Defiant held the forward position, its compact profile and heavy armament making it ideal for direct assault. Galactica anchored the left flank, its massive kinetic batteries ready to deliver the kind of sustained fire that had served the Battlestar through years of Cylon warfare. The Romulan Warbird maintained a cloaked position, waiting for the optimal moment to strike. And behind them all, Deep Space Nine's weapons systems powered up, Cardassian-designed phasers that hadn't been intended for capital ship engagement but would have to suffice. Dominion response? Sisko asked. O'Brien shook his head. Nothing yet, Captain. They received the message, but we haven't heard back. They're debating, Odo said quietly. The Founders will be analyzing whether the silent threat justifies exposing Dominion forces to potential Federation observation. They're probably arguing about it right now, some advocating for immediate military response, others suggesting they let us weaken ourselves fighting the Cylons before intervening. How long will they debate? Until it's too late, or tactically optimal. Whichever comes first. The Resurrection Hub reached weapons range. Its hull plates shifted, revealing launch bays that began deploying raiders by the hundreds. Not the organic mechanical hybrids from the earlier base ship engagement, but pure Centurion raiders, angular, brutal, designed for one purpose: destruction of organic starships. Incoming contacts, Worf reported from the Defiance tactical station. 347 raiders, spreading into attack formations. They're coordinating through networked intelligence. Each unit shares tactical data instantaneously. Vipers away! Adama ordered. Galactica's launch tubes opened, releasing the colonial fighters that had been humanity's primary defense against Cylon forces for years. They numbered barely 80, a fraction of the raider count, but they flew with the desperate skill of pilots who'd survived countless engagements against these exact enemies. Kara Thrace led the Viper formation despite her injured arm, the medical teams having done enough emergency work to let her fly. Her voice came across the tactical channel, steady despite the pain. All Vipers, remember your training. These are first-generation raiders, stupid, predictable, vulnerable to coordinated assault. Diamond formation, target their sensor clusters, use their networked intelligence against them. If one raider learns something, they all learn it. So teach them the wrong lessons. The fighter engagement began with the kind of brutal efficiency that made Sisko's chest tighten. Vipers dove through raider formations, using maneuvers that Federation runabout pilots couldn't match. They exploited the raiders' programmed response patterns, baiting them into attack vectors that exposed vulnerable hull sections, coordinating strikes that overwhelmed individual units before the collective could adapt. But there were so many raiders. For every one destroyed, 2 more took its position. The networked intelligence allowed them to learn from each engagement, adapting tactics in real time. Viper casualties mounting, Dax reported quietly. They're losing ships faster than they can inflict damage. Defiant, provide fighter support, Sisko ordered. Worf, use phaser arrays to thin out the raider formations. Give the Vipers room to operate. The Defiance phasers lanced through space, sweeping across raider formations with precision that the networked Cylons couldn't fully anticipate. Energy weapons behaved differently than kinetic rounds, and the raiders' initial defensive algorithms weren't optimized for phaser frequency rotation. It helped. But it wasn't enough. The Resurrection Hub itself opened fire, and Sisko understood immediately why it was classified as a dreadnought. Its weapons weren't standard Cylon energy beams. They were something new, something terrifying. Coherent streams of what looked like disassembled matter, breaking down molecular bonds at the quantum level. One beam caught a colonial transport that had remained too close to the defensive perimeter. The ship didn't explode, it simply stopped being a ship, its structure dissolving into component atoms that scattered across space. Molecular disruption weapons, Dax said, her voice tight with scientific horror. They're not destroying matter. They're deconstructing it at the fundamental level. Benjamin, our shields aren't designed to stop that kind of attack. If those beams hit the Defiant or the station, they won't, Sisko said with more confidence than he felt. Evasive pattern Omega. Keep us mobile, don't give them stable targeting solutions. Galactica absorbed the first direct hit from the hub's main weapons. The molecular disruption beam struck the Battlestar's heavily armored bow, and for 3 seconds, armor plating simply ceased to exist. Atmosphere vented from compromised sections. Damage control teams scrambled to seal breaches. But Galactica didn't break. The Colonial engineers had designed their ship to survive sustained punishment, and the Battlestar's internal compartmentalization limited the damage. Bulkheads slammed shut, emergency force fields activated, and somehow the massive vessel stayed in the fight. "Return fire!" Adama commanded. "All batteries, target that weapons cluster! If we can't destroy the hub, we disable its armament!" Galactica's kinetic batteries roared, sending streams of armor-piercing rounds toward the Resurrection Hub. The mechanical dreadnought's adaptive armor shifted to intercept, but kinetic weapons at this velocity couldn't be fully stopped by reconfiguring hull plates. Rounds punched through, penetrating deep into the hub's interior. And that's when the Romulans struck. Tomalak's warbird decloaked directly above the Resurrection Hub, so close that their shields were nearly touching. Disruptor fire at point-blank range tore into the hub's upper hull, finding the manufacturing bays that Adama had identified as priority targets. The explosions were magnificent, secondary detonations as half-completed Centurion units and weapons systems ignited in chain reactions. The hub staggered, its adaptive armor struggling to compensate for damage inflicted faster than repair systems could respond. "Excellent timing, Commander," Sisko transmitted to Tomalak. "We Romulans appreciate the value of dramatic entrances, Captain. But I'm afraid this vessel's defenses are adapting. I'm detecting weapons systems reconfiguring to target cloaked vessels. We won't get another surprise attack." The warbird peeled away, pursued by raiders that had been reprogrammed to detect cloaking signatures. Tomalak's ship took damage, but remained combat-capable, its superior shields holding against raider weapons fire. The battle devolved into brutal attrition. The Resurrection Hub continued manufacturing replacement units despite the damage to its production facilities. Raiders swarmed the Viper formations, accepting catastrophic losses because destroyed units could be replaced within minutes. The hub's molecular disruption weapons carved through space, forcing all Allied vessels into constant evasive maneuvers. "We're losing," Kira said quietly, watching the tactical display. "Slowly, but we're losing. They can replace their losses faster than we can inflict them." Sisko knew she was right. The Defiance shields were down to 40%. Galactica had lost 3 of its main batteries to focus raider attacks. The Romulan warbird was venting plasma from a dozen hull breaches. And the Resurrection Hub, despite the damage it had sustained, continued to function with mechanical efficiency. Then Odo spoke up, his voice carrying an edge of desperate calculation. "Captain, I have an idea. It's insane, it probably violates several Starfleet regulations, and it definitely requires me to do something I've avoided for decades. But it might work." "I'm listening." "The Cylons are networked intelligence. Every unit shares data instantaneously. That's their strength, but it's also a vulnerability. If I could infiltrate their network, introduce corrupted data at the quantum level, I could potentially crash their coordination protocols." "You're a changeling, not a computer virus," Sisko objected. "I'm a shapeshifter who can restructure my molecular composition to interface with technology. The Founders do it all the time. How else do you think we infiltrate computer systems? I could assume a form that mimics their data transmission medium, enter their network physically, and introduce chaos into their perfect coordination. You'd be inside a Cylon network," Dax said, horrified. "Surrounded by hostile synthetic intelligence with no backup, no extraction plan." "I'm aware of the risks, Commander. But we're out of conventional options." Odo turned to Sisko. "Captain, I'm asking for permission to attempt this. If it works, I can disrupt their network coordination long enough for our forces to destroy the hub. If it fails, you've lost one security chief instead of an entire station." Sisko wanted to refuse. Wanted to find another option, a safer plan, anything that didn't involve sending Odo into the mechanical equivalent of a lion's den. But the tactical display showed the truth. They were running out of time, ammunition, and ships capable of fighting. "Do it," Sisko said finally. "But Constable, you come back. That's an order. Odo's expression might have been a smile. I'll do my best, Captain. But you should know, if this works, the Founders will never forgive me. I'll be betraying fundamental changeling principles about maintaining our distinctiveness from solid technology. After this, I'll be as much an outcast as I've always claimed to be. You've already been fighting your own people. This just makes it official. I suppose it does. Odo moved to the transporter room, accompanied by O'Brien. The chief looked grim as he prepared the transport coordinates. Constable, I'm beaming you directly into one of those damaged manufacturing bays on the hub. Once you're inside, you're on your own. The interference from their systems will block our transporter lock. So whatever you do, do it quickly. I understand, Chief. Odo stepped onto the transporter pad, his form already beginning to shift, becoming more fluid, more adaptable. Energize. The transporter beam caught him mid-transformation. One moment Odo was in the transporter room, the next he was materializing inside the Resurrection Hub's scarred interior. The manufacturing bay was a mechanical nightmare, assembly lines producing Centurion units at impossible speed, repair drones swarming over damaged systems, and everywhere, the hum of networked intelligence sharing data at light speed. Odo let his form dissolve completely, becoming something between liquid metal and coherent energy. He flowed through the hub's systems, finding data conduits, and integrating himself into the information stream. It was like diving into an ocean of pure thought, but thought without emotion, without doubt, without anything resembling organic consciousness. Just pure calculation, optimization, efficiency. The Cylons' networked intelligence was beautiful in its terrible perfection. And Odo began introducing imperfection. He didn't attack the network directly. That would trigger defensive protocols. Instead, he introduced subtle errors. Navigation data with coordinates off by fractions of degrees. Targeting solutions with timing delays measured in microseconds. Power distribution algorithms that prioritized non-critical systems over weapons. Individually, each error was insignificant. But the Cylons' networked intelligence shared everything instantaneously, which meant the errors propagated across the entire fleet. Raiders suddenly found their targeting solutions unreliable. The Resurrection Hub's adaptive armor began reconfiguring in response to attacks that hadn't happened. Manufacturing systems started producing components with microscopic flaws. On the Defiance bridge, Dax watched her sensors in disbelief. Benjamin, something's happening. The Cylon coordination is breaking down. They're making mistakes, targeting errors, ships moving out of formation. Odo, Sisko said. He's doing it. All ships press the attack. Hit them while they're disrupted. Galactica's batteries fired with renewed intensity. The Defiance quantum torpedoes found gaps in the hub's defenses. The Romulan warbird emerged from cloak again, its disruptors carving through raiders that were too confused to respond effectively. And the Vipers, those 80 colonial fighters that had been holding against impossible odds, suddenly found themselves facing enemies that hesitated, that miscalculated, that died. Inside the hub, Odo felt the network fighting back. Synthetic intelligence analyzing the corruption, tracing it to its source, identifying the foreign element within their perfect system. Defensive protocols activated, electromagnetic pulses designed to purge invasive code, quantum encryption designed to isolate compromised data streams. But Odo wasn't code. He was a living being mimicking data structure, and every time the Cylons adapted to purge him, he shifted to a different form, a different protocol, a different level of system integration. It was exhausting. Maintaining coherent consciousness while distributed across a networked intelligence system violated everything changeling physiology had evolved to be. Odo felt himself fragmenting, pieces of his awareness scattering across the hub's systems. But he held on. Because outside, organic beings were fighting for survival. Because the Federation deserved better than synthetic perfection. Because 50,000 colonial refugees deserved a chance at freedom. The Resurrection Hub began to fail. Critical systems went offline. Manufacturing bays produced defective units. The molecular disruption weapons misfired, their quantum targeting unable to maintain coherent beams. "Now!" Adama transmitted. "All ships, concentrate fire on the hub's central core. This is our chance." The combined firepower of Galactica, the Defiant, and the Romulan warbird converged on a single point. Kinetic rounds, quantum torpedoes, and disruptor beams tore through compromised armor, penetrating deep into the hub's heart. The central core, the nexus where silent consciousness could transfer between bodies, where networked intelligence coordinated across the entire fleet, took critical damage. The hub didn't explode. It simply stopped. Systems went dark. Raiders lost coordination and began drifting. Centurion units aboard Galactica collapsed as their remote command signals ceased. And Odo, distributed across a network that was dying, felt himself beginning to dissipate. He tried to reform, to pull his scattered consciousness back into coherent shape, but the hub's failing systems were collapsing the data structures he'd been using to maintain cohesion. "O'Brien to transporter room," the chief transmitted urgently. "I'm detecting Odo's signature in the hub's wreckage, but it's fragmenting. I need a combat transport, maximum power, widest possible beam." "Chief, at that range and with that much interference," the transporter operator began. "Just do it." The transporter engaged, grabbing everything within a 10-meter radius of Odo's last known position. Matter streamed back to Deep Space Nine, coalescing on the transporter pad in a confused mass of changeling protoplasm, mechanical debris, and corrupted data crystals. It took Odo 3 minutes to reform. When he finally pulled himself into humanoid shape, he looked exhausted in a way Sisko had never seen, as if the effort of maintaining individuality had cost something fundamental. "Report," Odo managed, his voice barely a whisper. "The hub is destroyed," O'Brien said, helping him off the pad. "Raiders are scattering. The silent threat is neutralized. And Constable, you just saved everyone." "Did I?" Odo looked at his hands, watching them shimmer slightly as if he was having trouble maintaining solid form. "Or did I just prove the Founders right, that solids corrupt everything we touch, that maintaining our distinctiveness is impossible when we integrate with their chaos?" "You proved that choosing sides matters," Sisko said, entering the transporter room. "That principles can defeat perfection. That organic life deserves to survive, even when the odds suggest otherwise." Outside, the tactical situation was resolving. Colonial damage control teams worked alongside Starfleet engineers to repair critical systems. Romulan vessels maintained wary distance but hadn't cloaked, a gesture that Sisko recognized as grudging respect. And Galactica hung in space, battered but unbroken, its crews celebrating survival against yet another impossible enemy. Then the wormhole opened, and Dominion vessels began pouring through. 20 Jem'Hadar attack ships, followed by 3 battlecruisers, with a Vorta command vessel at the center. They surrounded the wreckage of the Resurrection Hub, sensors scanning the debris with obvious interest. Keevan's face appeared on viewscreens across the combined fleet. "Captain Sisko, Commander Adama, Commander Tomalak. The Founders send their regards and their thanks. You've eliminated a significant synthetic threat before it could spread to the Gamma Quadrant. However, we must now claim salvage rights to the Cylon technology for analysis and integration into Dominion defensive systems." "Absolutely not," Adama said flatly. "That's Cylon technology. We destroyed it, we claim it." "You destroyed it with Dominion intelligence about the threat's severity," Keevan countered smoothly. "And you're currently occupying space near a wormhole the Dominion considers strategically vital. Surely we can negotiate a mutually beneficial arrangement." Sisko felt the exhaustion settling in, physical, mental, strategic. They just fought 2 battles in as many days. His people were at their limits. The Colonials were beyond their limits. And now the Dominion was maneuvering for advantage while everyone else was too damaged to resist effectively. "Keevan," Sisko said carefully, "the Founders engineered the situation that brought the Cylons here in the first place. They manipulated dimensional barriers to create confrontation. 473 Colonials died because of founder experimentation. I'd suggest the Dominion has already extracted sufficient payment for any intelligence provided. The Vorta's smile never wavered. An interesting perspective, Captain. The founders view the situation differently. As a valuable test of organic resilience that unfortunately produced casualties. But perhaps we can discuss terms at a later time, when everyone has had opportunity to repair and reflect. The Dominion vessels withdrew slightly, maintaining position near the wormhole but not pressing their claim to the Cylon wreckage. It wasn't surrender. It was calculated patience, the founders recognizing that exhausted enemies could be negotiated with more effectively after they'd had time to realize how vulnerable they were. President Roslin's transmission came through on general broadcast. This is President Laura Roslin of the 12 Colonies. On behalf of my people, I want to thank Captain Sisko and the United Federation of Planets, Commander Tomalak and the Romulan Star Empire, and Constable Odo for their assistance during this crisis. We came to this universe seeking refuge and found ourselves in the middle of conflicts we barely understand. But we've also found something we thought we'd lost: allies who fight for principles rather than pure survival. The Colonial Fleet formally withdraws any consideration of Dominion alliance. We're placing our future in Federation hands, and whatever that future holds, at least it will be chosen freely rather than engineered through manipulation. In Ops, Sisko felt something unclench in his chest. They'd done it. Against Cylon dreadnoughts and founder manipulation, against impossible odds and their own exhaustion, they protected refugees who had every reason to choose security over freedom. Starfleet Command is responding, Kira reported. They've approved emergency asylum protocols for the Colonial Fleet. Settlement rights on new Bajorans pending Bajoran government approval, which, she smiled, First Minister Shakar just granted. The Colonials have a home. Adama's voice came through quietly. Captain Sisko, I owe you an apology. I spent so long fighting deception that I forgot what genuine principle looks like. The Federation isn't perfect, but you're honest about your imperfections. That's worth more than I realized. Commander, you kept your people together through catastrophic displacement, multiple battles, and political manipulation that would have destroyed lesser leaders. I'd say we're even. Maybe. Or maybe we're just beginning to understand each other. On Galactica's observation deck, Kara Thrace stood with her daughter, looking out at the stars of a universe that wasn't their own but might, somehow, become home. The child pressed her hands against the viewport, asking questions about planets and ships and whether they'd ever see soil again. Yeah, kiddo, Thrace said softly, her injured arm finally properly treated and healing. I think we will. I think we really will. The Bajoran wormhole pulsed with its usual mysterious light, no longer a threat or a strategic asset but simply a passage between spaces, maintained by beings who existed outside linear time and watched organic civilization struggle toward understanding. And Deep Space Nine, battered but standing, continued its mission, a crossroads where different peoples, different principles, different paths converged and somehow, against all probability, found ways to coexist. The war with the Dominion would continue. The Cylons would return, eventually, seeking the wormhole and the refugees who'd escaped them. The Romulans would pursue their own calculated interests. And the Federation would keep trying to prove that principles could survive contact with reality. But tonight, 50,000 refugees had chosen freedom over security. A shapeshifter had proven that loyalty mattered more than species. And a Battlestar that had jumped blindly through dimensional barriers had found something worth fighting for beyond mere survival. It wasn't victory. But it was hope. And sometimes, in the darkness between stars, hope was enough. The Colonial Fleet's integration into Federation space would take months. Bureaucratic processes that frustrated people used to military efficiency, cultural adjustments that challenged both Colonials and Bajorans, technological exchanges that required careful negotiation. But the foundation was laid. Galactica would patrol the Bajoran sector, providing defense against threats both familiar and unknown. Colonial civilians would settle on New Bajorans, mixing with another displaced population and creating something neither purely colonial nor purely Bajoran. President Roslin would navigate Federation politics with the same analytical skills she'd applied to quorum debates, becoming an unexpected voice for refugee rights and rapid response protocols. Commander Adama would forge an unlikely friendship with Captain Sisko, two officers who'd learned that command meant choosing between impossible options and living with the consequences. And the Cylons, somewhere in the dimensional barriers between universes, would calculate and plan and evolve. They had learned about the wormhole, about Federation technology, about the weaknesses in organic coordination. They would return, not immediately, but eventually, with adaptations designed to counter everything they'd encountered. But when they came, they would face not just fleeing refugees but refugees who'd found allies, principles worth defending, and the recognition that freedom, for all its chaos and cost, remained superior to perfect synthetic order. The Dominion would watch. The Romulans would scheme. The Federation would debate. And the Colonial Fleet would remember that choosing your own path, even when that path led through darkness and uncertainty, meant more than accepting someone else's carefully engineered salvation. In the end, Battlestar Galactica had landed not just in the Star Trek universe but in its heart. The belief that different peoples could work together, that principles could survive pragmatism's assault, and that the measure of civilization wasn't how efficiently it operated but how it treated those who had nothing left but hope. Somewhere, in the spaces between dimensions, other displaced civilizations drifted. Other refugees searched for homes. Other battles raged between organic chaos and synthetic perfection. But here, in this corner of space, at this crossroads of impossible journeys, humanity, both colonial and Federation, had proven that survival without freedom was just another form of extinction. And that was worth fighting for. Live long and prosper. Hit that subscribe button for more interesting stories.